One day, among the endless battles, there was somewhat incredible. There was a man who dared to challenge the forces of heaven and earth. He stood in front of a giant who looked at him disrespectfully, saying, "How did you dare to break my peace?" However, as soon as this warrior gathered his hand into his fist, the bandage on it suddenly broke into many pieces. It was a warrior with an invincible force of spirit, which did not go out even in the most unfavorable conditions. He is forever committed to his fists and courage. He rushed into battle. A demon from the Hua mountain that has fate the world is a story about who became a legend. His blow is a demon from the top of Mount Hua. We will plunge with his head into this fascinating story. Once in the world, a demonic sect appeared, which declared the war for the rest, trying to take possession of their power. Their fight forced the martial arts masters to engage their hand into a fierce battle against a common enemy. After 3 years of the cruel war, the desired peace finally came. The martial arts alliance won, finally destroying the demonic sect. However, the victory got great effort and was accompanied by significant losses. Tausis from Hua Mountain saw this undoubtedly curse. They were overwhelmed by the outrage that they got only a pathetic place on earth for huge losses. Senior monk Honchkon, at the head of the Hua Mountain, set an ambitious goal: to achieve such a power that no one even dared to cast a look towards this sacred peak. Another summer monk was waiting for his back, watching the master carefully, suspecting that he could do something unexpected. He pressed closer, feeling the fear that the owner could unexpectedly decide on some trick. The monk walked forward. She was taking his breath, because the unknown of the future looked over their sect. However, as soon as he looked up, he was absorbed by a wave of horror. A spooky spectacle unfolded in front of him. The surrounding lands turned into a fire, the buildings swept the flames, and the heavy, piercing smell of blood sat down. It looks like someone really dared to deprive all these people. The village seems to be severely attacked by restless local bandits. Some of the audience shared that rumors about the activity of bandits have recently spread. The experienced monk came closer to the breathless bodies, looking at them in detail to find the slightest hint. He took up it, having confidence. Among this crowd, it seemed to him that he heard a quiet moan. He exclaimed that he heard sounds similar to signs of life. The chief realized that in such circumstances it was almost impossible to survive. The senior monk plunged into the chaos of the bodies, with the hope of finding at least one living soul. He pushed the bodies and fragments to the side, continuing movement without stopping. Suddenly, among the chaotic accumulations of covered wood, he came across a survivor. Among the ruins was a child with carbon-black hair who was able to survive. Considering this phenomenon, they were in full delight and could not understand what it could be a reality. It seemed to them that his passionate admiration for life borders on madness. The senior monk immediately took the boy whose body was solid wounds. The boy clasped his teeth until the blood flowed slowly on his face. The guy was cut with fragments, and at the first cough from his mouth, an abundant puddle of blood splashed. The boy began to come to his senses. However, as soon as he opened his eyes, a stunning picture appeared in front of him. Nearby lay his friend, a soulless, icy cold dead, with bleeding wound on his neck. The boy's world suddenly fell to his feet. Despite his current state, he deeply experienced the pain of loss. For 5 years, it flew among the majestic mountains as if sharp blades of swords crashed into the ground. These mental peaks seemed to indicate the direction of the heavens themselves. Their peaks, similar to blooming lotus, were called this mountain ridge, the Lotus Ridge, and became a shelter for the Hua Mountain sect. In the same 100th of the ladder, the young man, who was rescued 5 years ago, climbed. His legs were shaking from tension, but he continued to move forward. The heavy 3 kilometers of lifting stretched in front. Although the pain pierced his whole body, he moved constantly. He dropped his eye continuously on his leg, densely lit. However, despite all, he firmly believed in his own ability to withstand. He perceived these wounds as insignificant little things. He constantly assured himself that he would certainly be able to overcome the top. As he approached the goal, he repeatedly repeated to himself, "A little more, a little." Teacher Dan Ho, elder from Hua Mountain, monitored him with his senior monk Han Co. 5 years have passed since my first meeting with Dan Ho. Since then, it has been overwhelmed every day, without exception. When he stated that he wanted to climb on his own, everyone laughed at him and called crazy. It is said that even martyrs of martial arts with difficulty overcome these stairs, and with a wounded foot, this task seemed impossible at all. To climb daily on the stow-foot ladder, a task is not easy, even for those who have healthy feet. Once Dan Ho found himself in this obstacle during a thick snowfall. The exhaustion dropped him off his feet, and he lost consciousness, but the next day, despite the illness, he rose again. Every new day, immersing himself in his thoughts, he steadily conquered the mountain. All this has been stretched for 5 years. This is exactly what I will have. The constant climbing to the mountain helped him grow a lot of muscles. At the peak, he was met by the master, asking if he had relifted. I will ask him for forgiveness for not listening to his words again. The mentor reminded him that in the course of his condition, for which nothing can be done. However, it was clear to him that the guy was unlikely to listen, so he urged him to approach. I will assure Ho-Ho that everything was fine with him, but the master insisted that he would come closer. As soon as the guy approached, the master invited him to sit on a chair, after which he began to massage his leg carefully, asking to stay stationary. He constantly emphasized that muscle massage after training would not only hurt, but vice versa, will benefit. Even during the massage, the expression of his face clearly testified his suffering. "Why are you so careless?" the master asked. "Do you really want death so much that you always give my always dissatisfied master?" "Sorry, I didn't have that intention," I will whisper. In the art of battle on the Hua Mountains, the feet play a key role and are crucial. If you manage to pass the exam and become a student, you will be aware of the art of gugunbo. This is the highest level of skill of foot movement, a real challenge even for the most talented students who face great difficulty in mastering it. The master was aware that even with the latest training, because of the injury of the legs, the ladies would not be able to master the art of gugunbo. Then the teacher said to him, "In order to be happy, a person needs to have a durable heart. When your heart becomes strong, fate will make every effort so that no pain is felt." The ladies fully realized the meaning of these words. He is abandoned for a long time. Intense workouts were boiling at the top of the Hua Mountain. The students were told to be alert and master the art of bukovan, imitating a tiger that rushes to their prey. The teacher insisted that the student attract every muscle of his body to a striking blow. He clearly demonstrated how the blows should be powerful, expressing it through their movements. Suddenly, when he saw who was approaching him, finally decided to testify to the older one. Lady noted that his path was leading to the John's palace. Suddenly, everything became clear to them. All the secrets of the martial arts of Mount Hua are collected here. The master appreciated his perseverance, realizing how difficult it is for him. He understood that for the new moon it would be a real test. The master turned to the ladies with warm words. He noted that if the ladies are to train persistently, sooner or later will turn into a real master. Only the lady asked if he would allow him to move on. He then continued his way in the direction. The rest of the students perceived him as the most faithful student gone gun. Everyone was convinced that this lame young man got the title of chief student just because of a happy occasion. How is it possible? Is he really able to engage in martial arts? The students asked themselves with surprise, following the lady. The master made all the skeptics immediately throw doubts and direct his energy to training. Hua Mountain teaches close unity among the students, but it seems that only the ladies realize how illusory it is. Every time these thoughts came to his mind, he made an effort to ignore them and not get stuck on them. He soon arrived at the magnificent palace of John. Rising to the top of the stairs, he collided with one of the swords, who, recognizing his indomitability, expressed his sincere respect. They invited him to go, assuring not to be ashamed. The main student Gongyun did not make any obstacles on the way. However, every time he came to the conclusion that all these techniques from the Hua Mountain have no value for him. Then he grabbed a book called Jucaps, a collection of the basics of martial arts Mount Hua, which is available for every student. It was written that one Tao's managed to separate the giant boulder in half using this technique. But despite its incredibility, this was still considered the basic skill. The only thing that was capable of ladies was to grind this technique for many years. His movements were so sophisticated that even the air diverged to the sides under their touch. His blow sounded like a loud cotton explosion. A powerful energy thickened around him, dissolving his long hair in different directions. He accompanied each of his stroke with special exclamations. Yukap guan, accounting, jukeps. For him, these concepts were not just the basics, but all that he had in his arsenal. Two swordsmen, standing near the palace, were surprised to the circumstances. How did the HO get permission to enter, while their fate is only to protect the approach to the entrance? It seemed to them that every outer student was significantly outweighed. In their view, he had long had to realize his restrictions caused by a leg injury. After finishing his workout, the ladies went to his home. During his journey, he came across ancient friends. To the left was Khan Soybean, in the center, Ken, and to the right there was a chunky Jean. They expressed his praise, but he joked more often when he saw him returning from the palace, John Bo. The ladies greeted the elders, whom he had not seen a long time ago, and they kindly addressed him as a younger brother. They wondered how everything is coming, and what news from his teacher. Mu justified that he was too concerned, expressing his hope that it would not be perceived as indifference from the teacher. All these statements were only silently answered, or briefly noted that his mentor was well aware of everything. When their attention focused on his feet, he hurried to assure that there was no reason to worry. The giant was angry because the ladies did not stop his workout. He told him that he would finally leave his pride and dive into science, gaining recognition as an outstanding Gaza, avoiding the thorny path. In response to the advice of his older brother, he advised him to leave the martial arts and become a scientist. Such unpopularity was angry with the giant brother, and he immediately grabbed the lady by the collar. The sister made an effort to quench the anger of an angry giant. At this point, he intervened, urging him to stop immediately. The strong man explained that the ladies are waste of his time and did not realize that it is really useful for him, assuring that he still remembers his words. "Don't be afraid, your words will live in my heart forever," said the ladies with a wonderful peace. Saya advised not to take his words to his heart. She emphasized that the words of the Jinn were not dictated by hatred, and she said that they were always ready to help if he suddenly gets a difficult situation. They have always swore to be his support. In response, the ladies only bowed and expressed his intention to continue his way. He was decided not to detain him. When they remained three, Mu asked a healthy question why their every communication with the lady becomes so tense. He noted that even if this happens unconsciously, it is important to remember how much pain of the ladies is going through daily. Healthy did not worry about it because he was convinced that he simply gave a friendly advice. In the end, training is only inevitable. He firmly believed that in a few decades everything would remain unchanged. Under unfavorable circumstances, the martial arts master with a damaged leg will not survive for a long time in the outside world. Kian watched carefully at how he went. He was convinced that there would be no power that could convince this young man around the world. "I recall, once had a dream so that I will choose my path and also become a scientist." However, he has long changed his mind, seeing the unbreakable power of the spirit of this young man. In the home of Han Co, they split dinner and gave a grateful heart to his mentor. Kian confessed that he considers himself a lucky man because he got a student as a lady. The lady realized that this is the best he can do for the teacher, because thanks to Khan, he found himself here. The event happened 5 years ago. If it were not for the intervention of the senior monk Han Co, I would not only be able to reach Hua Mountain, but may not have survived. For the ladies of Haiyan, the master was more than a mentor. Their relationship could be compared to the warm relationship of father and son. During the dinner, Khan asked the lady, "Do you still want to engage in martial arts?" With unwavering determination, ladies confirmed his desire. Then Khan wondered if he knew who his mentor was. I would guess that he was faced with the dear elder Jonggunja. The answer turned out to be quite true. Yonggunda was the most powerful genius of Hua Mountain, and Khan studied with him. Despite the fact that he was mostly forgotten, It was he who raised Hua Hug to the peak of grandeur. His figure at the same time stunned the enemy troops and inspired the allies for exploits. It is quite unusual that the most brilliant genius of the sect undertook to teach a person without the usual abilities. This gave rise to a lot of rumors among the students, many of which were bordered by the absurd. "Didn't you think why my master allocated me to all the students of Hua Mountain?" said Kian. The ladies were looking forward to the answer. One day, the mentor opened him a simple truth. The real power of the sect lies not only in the martial arts mates, but also in those who have heart strength. The master was in search of a consequence who was able to embody his will in teaching new generations of students on Hua Mountain. He made a decision, wishing to be Khan that person. Since then, Han has left the martial arts, fully dedicating himself to training. "Now I realized your wisdom, teacher. I apologize because perhaps I have failed you." After these words, Khan asked the ladies not to take everything so seriously, explaining that he shared it not to blame. He wondered whether it was known to do what scientists do. Ladies suggested that they explore ancient manuscripts and study the secrets of Taoism. However, Khan said that their mission is a little different. They are the guardians of knowledge about the martial arts of their sect. He approached the book wrapped in fabric. He confessed that although not a prominent martial arts master, his knowledge has provided him with some experience. One day he accidentally came across this book and unfolded it. This was a heavenly treatise for cultivation. This artistic technique originated in the times when the ancestors founded Hua Mountain. Hua Mountain martial arts have never stopped in their development, continuously complicating and improving. Kian was aware that with his wound, he would never be able to acquire these skills in full. The lady has already understood it for a long time, but he firmly stated that he did not intend to retreat. Kian was convinced that this method of cultivation could benefit, so he asked the lady to take a book, because his body had already gained sufficient strength. During the transfer of the book, Khan did not forget to warn to treat her carefully. This work has long turned into an integral part of the history of the majestic mountain of Hua. Since modern methods have not helped the lady find the answer, perhaps ancient techniques will show him the right path of a real warrior. The teacher noted that the daily climbs to Hua Mountain gave his muscles to significantly strengthen. However, the inside of his strength was still fragile. Close your eyes and imagination endless heaven in your mind. Feel their grandeur and crystal purity, free from unnecessary reflection, becomes angry with the heavens to one. Learn to direct their power only through mental energy. Meanwhile, the CO has been at the company of another student near the trail that stretched 100 feet in length. They were surprised that I did not appear because he never missed training before. Today, he has disappeared mysteriously. CO worried that if he did not come, then she loses his chance to find out about the choice of Master Hangim. Her friend advised to find him independently, and CO was sure that Chun Gun would appreciate such a step. Meanwhile, the ladies moved towards an old home with a straw roof and wooden walls. Opening the door, he stepped inside. Having a severity in every account, he was exhausted on the floor. Kian woke up and just began to knead his muscles, stretching. Kon approached the ladies, feeling that he was already on the verge of exhaustion. Standing at the threshold, he lifted his shoes. Looking through a narrow hole, he noticed that the ladies were dormant. He immediately approached and began to carefully massage his abandoned limb. It was the only thing he could support him at this time. The new morning came, and the clouds, as if thoughtful travelers, were slowly dreaming of mountain peaks. Under the noisy jets of the waterfall, the ladies plunged into meditation. He was surprised to realize that he did not feel pain for the first time, despite the grueling workouts. He thought that the master could resort to some mysterious method to support him, possibly giving some of his own energy. When he meditated, his brother Wan approached him. He suddenly interrupted his workout, calling him. He cast his eyes on his feet, thinking that he should soon call this disabled senior. In general, he always refused to recognize the lady on an equal footing. He was envious of the fact that this young man became the best student solely because of a happy occasion. Vaughn did not cease to wonder why, despite the fact that the whole sect despises him, this show was still over. Finally, he conveyed what he came for and reminded you the importance of not miss the selection. At that moment, Vaughn met with the sight of the lads, and he was afraid of fear. Those eyes were inadvertently black. The ladies were amazed. Is the wizard not really going to be selected? Returning, he moved forward. He was completely confused and could not comprehend what was happening around. It was unclear why the lady was moving so rapidly. Despite the injury of the leg, the lady was still faster than him. The lady was already close to the Jimna Palace, the majestic symbol of the power of the Hua Mountain. The students, noticing him, immediately guessed what purpose he appeared here. Behind his back, talking that this is not a place for lame, and probably he also tries to take possession of the master's techniques. Considering him, they could not but mention that as a leading student, John Guna, he has the right to participate. The students whispered among themselves, believing that with the injured foot, ladies will not be able to pass the selection, because it all depends on the duel. Saya felt joy when he saw that he had managed to have time. She asked him not to pay attention to the unjust words of the brothers who would only envy him. I will give her a bow, sincerely confessing that he had never hoped for such support. Suddenly, a man appeared. He ordered everyone to silence and offered to congratulate Master Hangim. Everyone gathered in front of the gate, which slowly began to dissolve. The students expressed their sincere respect for the prominent master. The gates gradually dissolved, filling the air with a tangible atmosphere of anxiety. The master's face slowly appeared from the gate, becoming more noticeable. As soon as the master appeared on stage, he immediately congratulated his students. For those who are still not familiar with me, my name is Hangim. He noted that he was here on behalf of the supreme leader of the sect, who sought to convey his skills to the maximum number of students. But the master was not going to waste time for empty classes. It didn't matter to him. It was the main student, a stranger, or even bastard. He agreed only the most capable. The students thought about why even external students were allowed to come. Maybe it's to open the door for everyone? Some people expressed doubts. Does not the head of the sect be worried about their secret techniques possible? At this moment, the master solemnly said, "We begin the selection, and let him win the most. I will realize that regardless of their origin, everyone has the opportunity to win." Having straightened all the muscles, he clamped his fists, trying to keep the faith in his strength and hoping that even the wounded leg would not interfere with his endurance. At that moment, Mukian approached him with a question. He asked the master how he plans to choose the most worthy of. The master from the very beginning warned Khan that his inheritance may be in vain. However, Kian only replied that it would be at least strange to give up such an occasion. After all, it is likely that one day his student will embody the spirit of Hua Mountain, too attractive temptation. Kian noted that regardless of the circumstances, he will continue to master the art of the Vanilette to heaven. Your heritage is contrary to my education, and I cannot just neglect so many years of effort, said Khan with a firm conviction, and the master realized that his student was really well aware. The mentor reported that those who express their desire will compete with each other, and he, watching their skills, will choose a student. When Mukian heard it, he decided to retreat, seeking to avoid conflict with his brothers and sisters. At this point, the master exclaimed, demanding to stop the chats and immediately start the selection. He first summoned Ungon with the catfish. Of course, master, they unanimously confirmed. The man brought a stick to hit the drum. Immediately after the sound, it was a signal to the start. They were steadily lined up against each other. Units with the sophisticated art of plum flower against the unsurpassed technique of 7-star sword. Mu and Se were referred to whom they would be able to win. Kotz Gin, an experienced sword, was convinced of his right to inherit the master, squeezing a wooden sword firmly in his hands. Yuen Jian firmly clamped his fists, remembering whose name and inheritance he fights. Mastering the master's technicians will be a great test for him. He summoned the opponent to a duel to find out who two of them is stronger. The 7 stars used by Soma was focused on lightning speed, which allowed him to finish the fight quickly. He lifted the sword and exclaimed that there were no personal motives in this. At that moment, he waved the sword with a sword, and the blow swept at an incredible speed. Yuen prepared for a lightning attack from Catfish. It was difficult to understand that in his hands only a simple wooden sword. Yuen, having dared on the counterattack, directed his fist, though it was not easy at such a dizzying speed. Noting the fact that Som lost caution, he quickly decided to take this right opportunity. Looking through his fingers, Catfish noticed how Una's fist was rapidly approaching him. In a moment he evaded, cleverly turning his head from a blow, persistent, like a rock, and a steep, like a shot. "What was the reason for such amazing acceleration in UNA?" said the Catfish. After that, he wanted to demonstrate his speed, waving his sword so that he was enlightened at the head of UNA. In the task of Yuna, not to allow the Som of retreat, because his reception, Fist of the Plum Bloom, is effective only at a short distance. Obviously, Catfish intuitively felt that Yuen tried to reduce the distance between them as much as possible. Lifting the sword for a new blow, the Catfish shouted with indignation that Yuen had too high opinion about its capabilities. "It's just an unspeakable power," the audience said with a breath. The lady watched closely at how one side was trying to reduce the distance, while the other persistently kept it. If the ladies were able to monitor all the battles, it would be great, because of long independent training, his experience in real battles remains almost zero. On the battlefield, none of the fighters intended to concede. The Catfish decided to release all his restraints. Following him, Yuen also jumped, and both hurried towards each other. Under their feet, stones with a crash were scattered on many debris. Catfish warned Yuen to be vigilant, because now it is almost impossible to distinguish his sword from the real. "Thank you that I reminded," said Yuen. The 7-star sword technique was incredibly fast. Yuen almost did not have time to turn away from blows. At the same time, a powerful power of the art of flowering plum has already gathered in his hand. A bright glow flashed near his palm. The Yuna hand almost touched the abdomen of the Catfish. The giant Catfish desperately opened his eyes when he felt a strong blow to his belly. His body is as light as a feather. From this powerful blow, everything flew in different directions. Yuen won. The passionate viewers shouted loudly, raising their hands up, while the master started his descent to the arena. One of the audience was delighted, because he had not felt such an exciting euphoria for a long time. Another, though not so strong, also decided to try himself. The Catfish confessed to his defeat, and Yuen reached out to his feet, calling the battle impressive. What an extraordinary power, thought, realizing that it was only the beginning of the competition. The students were even more inspiration, and the atmosphere changed dramatically. Lady has never observed such behavior of students from this sect. Is everything because of the mysterious master standing behind? He turned in his direction. The views of the master and his instantly crossed. The master was stunned because he immediately recognized in him the same young man whom Kon Kos took under his wing a few years ago. One of the master's view of the master sewed on the lady such an incredible burden that he could barely withstand him. The teacher wondered that this young man may not be destined to stay here. The next match will meet Khan Soybean and Mugul. The soybean-blooming plum was the only woman who skillfully mastered the martial arts all over Hua Mountain, and everyone knew it without exception. Many people were convinced that they already know the result without even looking. Having entered the arena, she intended to give him the opportunity to attack the first, given his younger age. However, with respect for her, he instead suggested that she start a duel. From her mouth a warning came. Excessive pride is able to ignite rage. A sense of dignity is necessary for the development of independence. How to succeed without this? Mu asked. However, she was already looking forward to the first blow. She waved her sword, calling him for protection. She, like a charming plum flower in the spring diversity, boldly rushed to her opponent. After the initial clash, Mu realized that her strength far exceeds his expectations. He realized that if he did not evaluate it properly, he would certainly be defeated. Soybeans wanted to demonstrate the true skill of possession of the sword, urging him to defend only. Her battle art is 24 graceful sword steps that resemble plum flowering. Drawing a counterattack, he still did not hold on to jokes, asking if she was aware of where her blows were directed. However, the expression on his face did not instill as much confidence as his words. This spectacle was simultaneously graceful and impressive. Every time soybean struck seemed like a plum flower blossom. It was exactly what they hoped from the technique of 24 steps of the Sword of Flowering Plum. Divide, being among the crowd, listen to the thoughts of others. Gul has not strengthened so much to compete with Khan Soybean. Gul, full of determination, fussed in the arena, reminding himself that it is not for him. However, his actions remained too leisurely, which he was openly informed by Soy. Applying a technique called 24 steps, Soybean has a vividly managed sword, easily cutting the air. Gul was curled up trying to avoid a blow. His face reflected the same helplessness that he was careless. In an incredibly way, he managed to deflect, and the top of the sword was literally scratching nearby, almost touching his liver. He understood that, despite the fact that the sword was with a wooden blade, a powerful blow could leave wounds. Therefore, he was grateful so that she actually saved his life. South expressed his praise, noting that he was unsurpassed, and asked that the next time he did not avoid the right to the first blow. After the battle, the crowd exploded from admiration, struck by the skill of Soybeans. Everyone around the following result. It left no chance on the counterattack and confidently brought the fight to the victorious end. "I wonder who will be next," said the master. Further, students of John and Su-gun came to the arena. John Guna jokingly called the ho-ho. The master did not rest the question of what would happen next, and what surprises prepared the ladies. Seeing how the ladies came into battle against him, Su-gun asked himself in surprise, why was he chosen? He sought to impress the master with his skills. He believed that he would not enhance such infirm. If he overcomes someone as weak as ladies, there will be no reason for pride. Behind his back, the audience was vividly discussed that the ladies had no chance of success. It seemed to them that he had to realize it and get off the competition. The ladies greeted the charity sword with all his nature. However, the master intervened in the conversation, asking for the lads of the Ho whether he was the student whom Keon invited to his care. As soon as the master approached, he made a gesture that the lady timed to complete the test. Lady, feeling the saliva in the throat, could not understand the cause of this feeling. Waiting for the moment when the master returned to him with his back, he got courage and asked why he was ordered to leave. The master said in response, "Do you ask because you really don't know it?" I wondered if his leg injury was the cause of it. The master stressed that there is a good reason for his removal as a warrior. The master noted that his techniques are difficult to master, those who have certain restrictions. The lady stood in silence without finding words for answer. The master continued, noting that, as a student of a scientist, it is more logical to follow their example. The lady hesitated and wondered whether he means that he should give up the martial arts at this stage. "Are you not aware of your restrictions at all?" the master asked in surprise. "Do you just want to surpass your own physical boundaries?" The teacher noted that even as he did not try, it is impossible to overcome such trauma physically. He stated that the lady would never be able to reach the heights of the ascension. He proposed to choose a different direction, one that leads to a natural light capable of illuminating its path. Vade strongly stated that it was impossible to do it. He sought to be treated in the same way as everyone else, and told the master openly. Despite the fact that the master struck very energy, he still decided to listen to the young man. After that, he solemnly announced that the battle began. He asked Su-gyun to help bring the ladies back to the real world. The students agreed that it is the best option for its well-being. Su-gyun appealed to the ladies not to be offended when they were face-to-face. Meanwhile, Saya noted that the ladies were using jukops. She returned to Mu-kon, whether the match should be stopped, as she seemed to be able to overcome the fist of 5 elements with such techniques. However, Keon was aware that it was the choice of the noble sword. The ladies took a battle rack, feeling ready for all the challenges that could appear. Su-gun sought to open up a real picture of the world in which he had to exist. Although he did not wish him harm, he still realized that it was necessary for the sake of the ladies. The lady became strongly involved in the battle, sending all his attention to the enemy and causing accurate blows. He was determined to prove to adults that their trust in him was justified. To the surprise of the enemy, his attacks were distinguished by incredible speed. The rival cleverly parried them, acknowledging that the blows were extremely powerful. Taking off the attacks, he realized that the ladies had perfected his skills persistently. By involving the same tactics used by the ladies, the enemy decided to attack in a similar way. His blow flashed so close that only a miracle did not touch the face of the lad, forcing him to barely evade it. Then the enemy changed tactics using the skill of 5 elementary fists. The lady was barely able to repel the devastating blows, defending himself. The opponent switched sharply to the attacks with the help of his feet. The ladies reflected the first attack, skillfully putting his knee. However, the next blow was even faster and more powerful. However, the attack could not break through the protection of the lads, which was a lot of struck by his opponent. The opponent began to be angry because I will be skillfully evaded from his attacks. Did you always have so skillfully reflected the attacks of Sugyun? Other students were interested in watching the duel. At this time, the ladies felt an unbearable pain in his hand, realizing that although the blows were ordinary, it seemed like a hand was about to roll away from the body. Being next to his sister, Mukion confessed that the ladies had to do better than he could do it himself. However, Saya had doubts as to whether he could overcome the technique of 5 elemental fists with his own skill. At this point, the ladies decided to show everything that he was capable of, but the circumstances were against him. Su-gun launched an attack with all force, hitting his fist directly into the enemy's chest. The blow of such a force made the lady fly back until he swept on his back. The lady squeezed his fist and, half rising, began to climb on his feet. The audience doubted whether his skill would compete with the enemy's technique. Su-gun approached the ladies and asked if the words of the elder came to him. "No matter how many times you do not conquer Hua Mountain, it remains impossible," he said, hinting at Ho-Ho's that time to admit his defeat and give up his attempts. However, I did not even think to retreat. He categorically rejected the idea of going on the path of a scientist only because he was so commanded. The ladies were determined to confirm that his choice was not false. Even when the sick leg became ballast, he did not find the will to stop. Noticing how the ladies moved forward, Su-gun decided to warn him again. The ladies did not plan to use the technique of 5 fists, but under the careful eye of the elder, decided not to waste time. It came to the time when Su-gun has started the technique of 5-element fists. With this attack, he rushed forward, leaving the lady under the fire. It was extremely difficult to resist this tension. In addition to the power of strokes, Su-gun could have a stable, strong steel. There were no choice in the ladies. It was only necessary to evade the blows, not to rely on luck. Watching this action, other students immediately began to talk about how skillfully he evades. They were fascinated as he, despite the injury of the leg, as if the bird was circling in the arena, skillfully avoiding every blow. He tightly pressed his leg to the ground, forming a stable resistance. It gave him the opportunity, like a lightning flash, to rush forward with a firmly clenched fist, heading just on the enemy. The power of the impact was so large-scale that the energy dispersed in all sides, leaving behind an echo. Su-gun felt all the power of this striking blow. He could not think that I will be able to give. The ladies demonstrated the incredible force that caught everyone by surprise, leaving everyone in delight. The audience was so absorbed by the event that a genuine delight was glowing on their faces. The crowd roared his name for a moment, but this impulse quickly extinguished. Su-gun unexpectedly struck the ladies with a powerful blow, suddenly stopping his triumphant moment. The ladies could not stand the frantic pressure and fell to the ground. Blood drops flew into all directions, and his back lands on the cold, solid surface of the arena. "This is the end," said Su-gun, directing all his efforts to finally end the ladies. The lady suddenly noticed that the enemy's knee was rapidly approaching his head. He exhaled and crossed his hands, put the block to stop the blow. Su-gun noted that the ladies are incredibly skillfully parked all of its strongest attacks, which was very nervous. He remembered what impression he leaves in the eyes of the elder, the one who delayed with the beginning of the battle. I will bravely enter the battle, ignoring unbearable pain. Sugun realized that although he did not prefer to use his strength against Calicus, he now has no alternative. The audience has covered the anticipation that something exceptional will happen now. Saya noted that it was already beginning to use the technique of flowing plum steps. The art of battle lads cannot even match it. However, the ladies did not think to stay in the shade of events. Gathering with his forces, he clenched his fist and resolutely rushed into battle. But his blow, strong as steel, walked past the target. Lowering his head, he noticed a dazzling light. The reflection came from the energy of Esugunu, which used the technique of the flames that tears the gold. This technique attracts the powerful power of fire to restrain gold inside the enemy, which can lead to a fatal consequence, but not for nothing it is named. Taoism has a cycle of 5 elements: fire, metal, wood, earth, and water. Each of these elements suppresses the other, forming a harmonious balance. It's already an end? The students, struck by the way, used the technique of flames that curbs gold against the ladies of Ho. The ladies stretched on the ground, inhaling the air. Unbearable pain pierced every cell of his body. Choosing coughs, he withdrawing with his effort pushed drops of blood from his mouth. But clasping his teeth, he constantly reminded himself that retreating was not an option. Sugun could not believe that the ladies would stand on his feet after a devastating stroke from the technique of 5 elements and, weighted steps of flowering plum. It was clear to him that the pain of a stroke that suppresses gold should be incredibly unbearable. Despite the fact that ladies on his knees, he believed that he would certainly search for his chance to win. As soon as he rose to one knee, Sugun immediately asked him to stop. "Younger, wait." There was a call, to which the ladies resolutely replied, "I cannot retreat now." At this time, the master gave them an order to act. Sugun has fallen into confusion, unable to understand how the ladies still hold on to his feet, although he can almost not move. The master noted that the spirit of the home remained strong and unbreakable. He noted that the ladies had not left out, so it is too early to stop the duel. He added that he would not teach the martial arts of those who are prone to surrender. Sugun dreamed that the ladies eventually recognized the defeat, but he just climbed on his feet, ready to continue. Sugun dropped on one knee and quietly informed the Ho that his interest in the elder was exhausted. He wondered if he needed to break all the bones of the lads to capitulate. Sugun was ready to put everything on the map. He strongly pushed away from the earth and boldly rushed into the thickening of the battle. The next blow was called flowering plum technique. The lady found himself on the ground, exhausting the unbearable pain after this severe blow. Other students were even more deeply impressed with the fact that Suguna had to use the sword of blooming plum technique to overcome the lady. The audience was passionate about how seriously Sugun approaches this duel, understanding all its significance. The ladies concentrated all his efforts to skillfully dodge the dangerous direction of impact. Sugun watched him in a way of hearing, fixing his every step. With every powerful blow, blood splashed in all directions. The lady barely had the strength to get out of place once again. That is why he suffered several more painful blows. A few blows knocked the soil out of his feet, and he fell down the floor. Sugun rose to his feet and calmly said, "Here is she, reality." At that moment, the brother of Ho-Ho's worked for him and asked him in Gon, as his body copes with such tension. He noted that regardless of the determination of the lads, the physical boundaries remain insurmountable. He noted that the path of the master of martial arts is not for ladies. This has been said more than once. He said that the elder is acting guided by the good for the future mountain of Hua, and urged not to worry about the lads of Ho. But suddenly noticed the arena, because everyone was convinced that the fight had already ended. But the ladies got up again, saying decisively that he had not put a point. Sugun was already rushing forward, skillfully wiring with his sword. Lady Ho caught the perfect moment to take advantage of the effect of surprise. Surrounding quickly realized that Sugun was in annoyance, because its blows became more sweeping. Ladies moved forward, heading directly against the attack of Suguna. It was his only opportunity to avoid a sword strike, and I used it to use it. He took this opportunity, putting all his strength. The impact of the ham is completely survived in the abdomen of the enemy when he lost caution for a moment. Su-gun rejected a few meters ago, but he was skillfully landing on both legs. Is it finally an end? The lady flashed in his thoughts. As they are panting, Su-gun coughed blood and realized that he had shown excessive lightness in his behavior about the ladies. He was aware that if he had put all his power in this blow, the consequences could be fatal. In the attack of rage, he again attacked the lad, threatening the sword. The ladies watched the same spectacle in front of himself. The blade raced exactly in the trajectory, where his head was still a moment ago. This blow caused such a devastating blow that far exceeded all the previous ones. The wooden sword with noise was struck by the lady in the head, filling it with a feeling of acute pain and heaviness. The pain that pierced the lad was unbearably awful. Summing this, the master proclaimed that the lads have a true talent. Your blow caused by Suguna is a clear testimony to this. He argues that even the greatest talent turns into nothing if you do not know how to master the art of managing KI. He appealed to the ladies with a request to understand the situation and surrender. But what does it mean to give up? Said the lady in the depths of his soul. If he had the opportunity to retreat, he would have done it for a long time. However, he did not even think about retreating. He was aware that if he would eventually break, he would certainly call into question his own capabilities. His thirst for becoming a skilled martial arts master, all the efforts he makes for this purpose, can come to naught. Stretching his eyelids and clamping his teeth, he bowed his head, determined to deny his defeat. Sternly looking at the master in his eyes, he strongly stated that he would not retreat, even if it would mean death. "Are you overwhelmed by desire, isn't you?" said the teacher, with surprise in his voice. He asked a few more questions, addressing them with Suguna, trying to find out why he was drawn for so long. Su-gun was lost at that moment without grasping what was required of him. Other students noticed that the ladies were barely on his feet, and the master continued to incite Su-gun to attack him in such an exhausted state. With a cold calm, the master ordered Su-gunov to strike the ladies, even though one of the students hinted at the need to stop the fight. Suddenly, Su-gun rushed forward, trying to impress with the sword. Having waved, he pleadedly asked the ladies to just fall to the ground, adding to this a please walk. This spectacle was so painful that some students did not withstand and turned away. However, the ladies resisted. He was not so weak that just surrender. He took a blow directly into the abdomen. The blood splashed more and more, spreading into all directions. No one could figure out why he was carrying such an unbearable flower. Some believed that he wanted to demonstrate. Even with broken bones, he remains a true master of martial arts. For him, the injured leg had no significance. Su-gun turned to the sage. He did not resist and exclaimed several times, "Elder." The elder also began to think about the termination of the battle. He was aware that if the ladies were shown, his opportunities would not be limited to the loss of skill. He would not be able to do even the simplest job. However, in his gaze, a combination of despair and unwavering determination raged, which spoke louder than any words. The master did not hide the fervent and relentless flame of anger that raged in Damho's eyes. Blood-continuous drops fell down, washing his legs and leaving a known red trace every step. It made the master of the master fight with trepidation. Everyone around sought to stop the clash, and Su-gun considered the Gamni home reckless. However, this fool moved persistently without stopping. His face was so mutilated that he could barely recognize himself. In the end, his forces were exhausted, and he kneeled down powerlessly. Sugun asked him. However, the ladies stated that this was not the end, firmly resting his hand into the ground and trying to get up. It was difficult for him to speak, but he gathered the remnants of strength not to stop. Su-gun waved his sword again, strictly ordered to stop. The master watched the events quietly without saying a word. "I will be pressed again to the floor again," he noticed it. "I will compete it to the very end," and now that he was lying on the ground, other students intervened, believing that it was time to stop this match. They approached him and went to lift. The first to rush to support the ladies was Mu and Se, urging him not to give up. Blossoming from anger, the master ordered the students out of the sight to continue the test. Time has passed, and now I will go to Hua Mountain. At the peak of the mountain, like a fortress, the dwelling of the elder CO stands. The shabby and barely live ladies were taken directly to the CO family, calling the elder. The door rolled up with a roar. The elder, barely seeing the guy who was injured, almost lost consciousness. He could not comprehend what had happened, so he addressed the question of the one who brought it. The student said it happened in the test process. The impression was that the body of HO was reminiscent of a more warrior who survived a deadly battle than the one who participated in the usual trial. He once again wondered who brought him to such a state, but was asked to calm. It was definitely not a moment for showdown. Surprisingly, the lady managed to survive, and this is a real miracle. Konseo tried to bring him to his senses, asking if he listened to his voice. Pulling a few pills from the box, he examined them carefully. The elder did not worry about the events that unfolded. His only purpose was to save the lads. He prayed to stay alive and not leave his mentor. Even Keon could not hold the tears that rolled down the cheek. Suddenly the lady coughed, breathing the wind of hope into the heart of the master. In the majestic Palace Chkveon, located on the picturesque Hua Mountain, they were passionate about how the elder managed to cope with many difficulties. Finally, they had real masters of martial arts that caused pride. Chan Munin, a prominent martial arts master, noted that the achievements of his students are striking, even against the backdrop of the success of other sects. Al, who stood opposite, stressed that a considerable way is waiting ahead. To restore the greatness of Hua Mountain, devotion is needed, which exceeds any previous one. The act noted that to restore Manhwa requires extraordinary talent, which is separated only in 1 of the 1,000, not 100 people. The only thing that Hua's mountain needs at this moment is an exceptionally gifted goss. It's all because of our elder self, sacrifice. 20 years ago, after the end of the war with the demonic sect, Hua Mountain began to experience many difficulties. The leaders who were destined to raise a new generation were killed, leaving Manhwa on the threshold of decline. During this difficult period, the elder concentrated all its power and energy on the revival of Hua Mountain. As a result, he was deprived of the opportunity to continue training in the martial arts. Choosing a new way, he decided to leave the martial arts for the sake of rest of the Hua Mountain. Having the most significant potential among students, he gave everything he had in the name of the sect. However, he was bypassed by a wonderful pill, which is intended exclusively for Vat Munins. He gave the Him valuable elixirs that are only produced on Hua Mountain. The Han Him was able to reach his level through the sacrifice of the elder. The act immediately undertook the restoration of Hua Mountain, working for 2 decades. Thanks to his efforts, Hua Mountain has turned into a grandeur we know it now. The other understood it better than anyone. Over time, the master had the desire to create, and for this, he was deeply grateful to the act of Inu. Although his words sounded reliably, the act still insisted that he would take the student in order to convey his knowledge and wisdom. He wondered what procedures were followed to elect the heir. No difficulties, the master assured, promising to present a plum pill for his student. After that, the act wondered if there were one who interested him among the most gifted students. For a certain reason, the ladies of the woman floated in the memory of the master. However, he told the act that the most capable students have almost completed their studies, and it is difficult for them to master new techniques. The act wondered if he intended to choose his future student among ordinary students, or even those who belonged to the external circles. The authoritative mentor noted that the gifted person is not determined by his position in the hierarchy. To turn into a sword that embodies the greatness of Hua Mountain, exceptional abilities and efforts of such a scale are needed that blood and sweat are literally poured. At that moment, Kon-si was rapidly bursting into the room, paying attention to the elder. Kon-seo was in a state of panic, but the acting reassured it, urging to reduce the tone, hinting at the place in which they found themselves. Keon came here, learning that the senior was here. The senior immediately wondered whether Kon came through his student. It was obvious that yes, so Han wondered if the older really sought to bring his student to death. By no means I didn't have that mind, the master said. But why did you break his body into pieces? Khan asked. The master noted that only this could be saved. He explained that to convince the ladies to give up martial arts is a method to protect him. However, Khan struck his fist on the table, strongly assuring everyone that it was nonsense. He stated that he would not be able to save himself if he stopped engaged in the martial arts, for which the act called the young man to maintain calm. Their conflict was still lasted, and Khan again expressed his misunderstanding of the senior behavior. The senior addressed the younger. Is he not exhausted? He noted that he did not understand how a person with physical constraints will be able to succeed in the martial arts, although he acknowledges that he is sorry for the lost talent. Being in a state of irritation, Khan asked why the lady prevents injury to the martial arts. The master is convinced that the art of combat of Hua Mountain is worth much more than it can grasp the cripple. The disappointment swept Han when he said to the elder that he never thought to hear such words from the most glorious sword of Mount Hua. But the sword remained adamant, stating that for the sake of Hua Mountain, he was ready to go to any sacrifice. He stressed that the suffering that his student endured was for the benefit of the student himself. The swordsman came to the conclusion that it would be better for the ladies to leave behind the unattainable dreams. Hearing this, Khan noted that his statement is a solid sophism. Do you understand how cruel and at the same time difficult can be the path chosen in the martial arts? Asked the sword. He noted that if the teacher was wrong, he would call him to choose the path of science and forget about martial arts. The swordsman asked why the master decided to teach such an incapable student. Kian felt a prickly pain when he heard these words from the most famous swordmaster of Hua Mountain. However, the swordsman insisted on his own, assuring that he had left no chance to other students. He stated that he wants to prove the world of martial arts is not a place where someone like a lady can survive. The Sidnik emphasized that he does not regret his choice and decisions made even now. Kian realized that the him was still offended by the unfortunate case. At that moment, Kian turned to the rank of Ina. He wondered in the act of Ina whether he considers the words of Gima sincere and true. The rank asked Han whether his student was the same guy whom he took to him 5 years ago. Nen nodded, emphasizing that it was true, and explained that the ladies belonged to his Rehua. He then asked if it was so scary that he was studying the martial arts. The act began to think about which path would lead Hua Mountain to true heyday. Han Co, noticing the silence of the rank, again asked him to say something. In the end, the act rose and noted that to allow the young man to climb Mount Hua 5 years ago was a mistake. For Han, these words have become a painful blow to the heart, unexpected and acute. He remembered the moment when the lady woke up from his numbness, and his eyes glowed with relentless determination and passion for life. These were eyes that could not belong to a simple child. The rank was convinced that mastering the martial arts could only bring the lady disaster. He noted that if it were not for Han's persistent requests, he would never have agreed to let Ho Hua Mountain. For Heian, all this looked full of nonsense. Closing the door, he said that to teach the gaps to the holy arts is not the best idea. Returning home, Kian only prayed to wait for them. It has come when the ladies will show how seriously they were wrong. Neon would not release him, and it became obvious of those tears that flowed with his gray mustache and beard. The HO was on the verge. His condition was so critical that the body was given great damage. If it weren't for his careful preparation, the opportunity to step again could only remain a dream. He will take at least 3 years to recover so that all wounds heal. It is now the most favorable moment for the ladies to delve into the martial arts. In 3 years, the development of his musculoskeletal system will stop, subtracting the opportunity to realize his true potential, as if he had forever banned the senior Khan Gim. However, Khan Co was not going to play by their rules and firmly believed that the events would not be unfolded as they planned. To Joy, I will avoid serious internal damage, which significantly improved his prospects for full recovery. Thanks to the heavenly technique of cultivation, its circulatory system was under reliable protection. Without this, he would risk staying in a coma for life, deprived of the opportunity to move. It was destined from above. Standing over a fixed body ladies, the master pledged to never bother him, carefully cared for him in this state of fainting. All he wanted was that he could stand a little. The Lord was set to bring up a real great fighter from him. Konseo was a scientist who gave life to the service of science, but his combat skills remained at a level not exceeding the average. If it weren't for the how, he would never dare to climb the mountain himself. He mastered many techniques for calming his heart, but in the face of the threat, all of them turned out to be powerless. He carefully rose to the stone, ready to take the next step forward. Although his heart was full of fear, he had to do it for the sake of the ladies. Taking one hand for the crust and the other cautiously grabbed the sharp stones, he confidently moved forward. Although it was not easy to move in those circumstances, it was steadily moving forward, step by step overcoming difficulties. In the end, having overcome the entire way, he arrived at the place of his goal. The next day, the Lias HKA continued to rest on the bed after the busy events, which was exhausted. The master was in the yard tasting tea and reflected on future plans. He reasoned how to help the lads of Ho rotate the lost strength. The master built the medicine, which he subsequently passed to his young student. When he spoke to the ladies, he barely managed to say a few words. He was so weak that he was fully communicating. The teacher felt a deep trembling in his heart when he saw that the gave HO finally came to his senses. He quickly approached, calling for peace and relaxation, to which he will give Ho-Ho with a barely audible voice. Teacher. However, I will immediately apologize because of his impotence. The master reassured him, explaining that he had not done any misconduct, and asked not to worry. He promised that the recovery of the HO ladies was even better than hoping, and assured that he would make every effort. After getting the necessary pills, he prepared them to support the health of the ladies. At this point, the lads noted that on the hands of the teacher there were traces of scratches from hard work. I will not understand how the teacher's hands hurt, because he only reads ancient texts and devotes his days to learning. At this point, he realized that the mentor had injured his hands, overcoming every stone on Hua Mountain to get these pills for him. Apparently, under his clothes, he hides even more scars gained in this exhausting work. And the master insisted that I will give the HO as soon as possible to accept the pill. Grabbing the pill, I immediately threw it into his mouth. So from now on, you need to focus completely, the master said, watching how the Ho-Ho was swallowing a magic pill. He asked him to use the technique of celestial cultivation so that the energy of the pill would spill all over the body. I will take the medication that contained the difficult path of his teacher to the top of the mountain himself. It was there that he found a rare healing grass from which he made unique pills for spiritual development called Udodan. The cultivation pill, known only to a limited circle of scientists, remained a secret, revealed only by a few. Although it does not increase internal energy as rapidly as plum-flowering pills, it strengthens the body and musculoskeletal system with constant consumption. If the technique of celestial cultivation is similar to a strong iron smithy, then Unyu Dan resembles dry firewood that smoke in its viscera. It is thanks to these firewood in the mountain that shelters even brighter. As a scientist, Khan So has mastered a huge number of books in martial arts. As opposed to the average master, his awareness seems to have no limits. Every day, following the instructions of his teacher, I will start the morning with the reception of the pill. Thanks to the art of heavenly cultivation, the days in his life were flashed, like a moment. The moon passed, and the HOs began to show the first signs of revived force. The master, as always, is located next to the kettle in the yard, deepened in reflection on future actions. As soon as I stopped the threshold, the master immediately asked his well-being. I will give you a smile that he was ready to walk on his own. The master promised to find martial arts that would be perfect for his physique. The man explained that standard approaches do not fit him, so there is a need to develop a unique martial art that would only fit him. First, you need to create methods that will be well groomed for its damaged leg. Because he cannot actively use his legs, the usual methods are not suitable for him. I will understand that because of his leg injury, he would not be able to master something too complicated. Still, Kon-so, assured that it was only another challenge that they can overcome, and confidently took the stone in their hands. He made a small roller coaster on the table, demonstrating that stability movements can become the foundation of his fighting style. The master suggested that these stones are an imperfect wall. Showing one of the stones, he said, "This wall is your opponent. Martial arts masters who have honed their skills are strong as an inaccessible stronghold." He wondered in the ladies as he intends to cope with such formidable opponents. "I will give you determination that the only way was to overcome them through their strength." "However, this is a mistake," the master said, not agreeing with the idea of ladies. "A key thing is speed. When it is large enough, then even the most powerful opponent loses its threat." Tools to break the fortress walls during the siege known as ram. The gate of the HO should follow the example of a ram, lightly fast. All its strength is concentrated at one single point. This is the skill in the movements of the feet. "That's what it means to gain control of changes through simplicity," said the master, revealing the main idea of the plan. He baptized this method offensive steps. They in no way require unnecessary effort. His leg should turn into a stable base, which can easily withstand the weight of powerful power. I will step by step mastered these attacking movements, and over time, its diligence began to bear fruit. Soon their path led to a giant boulder. From now on, their duty was to avoid contact with people. Among the forbidden martial arts, there is a special equipment known as Hyolshchongak. This creation belongs to a demon that wandered the expanses of Hancho 2 decades ago. Depicting a circle on a stone, the master told that legends were talking about a demon that was such an infinite force that his blow was allegedly able to repaint the sky in a bloody red color. He'd drawn a line on Earth, emphasizing that the demon did not even try to hide his relationship, eventually turning into the main enemy Hancho. Then hundreds of skilled martial arts combined efforts to confront him and overcome, but he relentlessly destroyed them. After that, he finally disappeared from the scene of public life and never appeared again. In the end, it turned into a legend that most people considered forgotten. They thought he left this world disappointed after that battle. However, the reality was completely different. Instead, to simply avoid the members of the Ganho clan, he disappeared, because he intervened the mighty king of the swords of Manhwa, Sanchonja. Like Ugyonpe, this warrior was one of the 10 heavenly masters of this world, and now they decided to find out which of them is more skilled in fencing. The struggle lasted continuously, the day changed the night, and their blows made the whole world shudder. In the end, San victory literally in the last moment. If Ugyonpe did not spend its inner strength escaping from other masters, even the dignity would not be able to win it. Such was his great power. He intended to destroy the book, however, having read the content, he changed his mind. Despite the fact that the knowledge she contained could get into the hands of such insidious people as the Ugyonpe, the martial arts presented in it were truly exciting. In a hopeless situation, not finding a different way out, he decided to hide the book from prying eyes, entrusting its storage by scientists. Thus, this book fell into the hands of scientists, and its history has led them to the present moment. By exploring this knowledge and experimenting with them, you can invent the perfect technique of attacks. I will give you, after hearing these words, he addressed the teacher with the question of what to do next. The teacher reported that it would be his task today. He has only one powerful step to reach the boulder mark. The boulder remained about 20 feet, or about 6 meters. I will define this distance as so great that even the martial arts master would not be able to overcome it with one jump. Since the left leg was required to perform the jump, the master indicated the line by drawing a line. He stressed that under no circumstances the HO ladies cannot cross this line. The master was aware that such a distance seemed unattainable to human capabilities, but the ID was forced to overcome it. Although he is injured and has problems with his leg, successful completion of workout will give his body a sense of perfection. At this point, the mentor gave him the command to start. Finding a confident point of support under his foot, I will have a powerfully repelled and rushed forward. Well, as they say, the first pancake is always a comma. It failed just on the leg. The master noticed that this once again proves. His body leans to the left. It was instructed to start again to adjust your pose. Again pushed away from the ground, I will prepare for the next jump. He made a jump, but again fate turned back to him. Getting up after the next fall, he, squeezing his fist, relied on the ground, trying again to try his strength once after. The distance to the stone vest seemed excessive and almost insurmountable. Frankly speaking, he even doubted his abilities, whether he would really be able to do so. The master only explained that his mission now is to jump to the boulder again and again, despite all the obstacles. Without any hesitation, the lads of Host answered that he would return to this as many times. Every day he sought to get to the boulder, repeating the jump after the jump, hardening the body and strengthening the spirit. At first, his fist was too far to reach the boulder, and he slightly straightened from the line on the ground. Only a month was enough to go in the right direction. Since then, as he began to notice progress in his approach to the rock, a real test has begun. Each blow to the wounded leg on the ground responded with irresistible pain, as if the muscles were about to break. After a month of intensive training, we were able to overcome the jumps of 10 feet. Having overcome these last 10 feet, he had to spend 2 months. And now the day that he waited for so much time has come. Finally, the HO gave it to the boulder, on which the mark was flashed. Finally, he overcame the first border. However, he was aware that only to reach the boulder was not enough. It was necessary to act faster and with more power. It requires not only lightning speed, but also a powerful inner force capable of breaking this boulder. Meanwhile, a group of merchants from Bukhara, satisfied with favorable transactions in the West, went back to mine. 30 years ago, the Gene founded the group, having gained a striking experience in the Martitian Martyrs. Since then, he has gained a perfect reputation. They raced hard, striving in 10 days to reach Hampsosan. Some people helped push the cargo cart to reduce the load on the horses. Spring slowly entered its rites, and in Chonvona, the splashes of colors and aromas of flowers began to explode everywhere. 2 men stopped to discuss this by enjoying the early signs of spring awakening. They have frankly confessed that they were already beginning to worry for home, because since they left their native walls, it has expanded 11 months. They eagerly sought to breathe again the aromas of their home and to attract their loved ones. However, the situation was not as safe as it seemed at first glance because they were trapped behind the bushes. Some from the group ordered the ready to keep their weapons and be vigilant. But in a moment, their blood splashed on all sides. In the eyes of his friend, one of them died a cruel death. He strongly ordered to defend against the enemy and carefully keep the load. Then the captain wondered who had sent the attackers. One of the men noted that although they have no idea who these people are in front of them, but their skill is truly impressive. My name is Asun. I am a senior student in Mudan and manage the Bukhara delivery team, he said with confidence, looking at enemies. He turned to the attackers with indignation, asking for whom they had themselves to attack the book delivery team. A man with a tattoo on his shoulder was thrown if a son was feeling pride from what belongs to the Mudan sect. Oh, Sleep was in a frantic outrage, because he felt that they were being treated as if it were worthless. He was steadily demolished by any charges against his address, but would never allow anyone to humiliate the Mudan sect. A man with a bright painted face stated that the pride of the son of Gon for Mudan looks quite funny. Pushing from the ground, he rushed in their direction. Your sect rose the tail when she met us, he dropped boldly. It has passed 3 decades since the world has convinced them. The man pointed to a tattoo on his shoulder, a demon's sign known around the world, reminiscent of a fireworks explosion. He asked if Gon's Sleep had not yet understood who he was dealing with. Oh, son, Gon noted that this fireworks unfolded in the shape of a flower. At that moment, he comprehended the truth. A real master of demonic arts stood in front of him. The man smiled happy, glad that the dream finally realized who he really was. A smile on his face asked whether the one was fulfilled by the Sudan sect full of fear of them. The dream could not believe that he had a real demonic practice. However, the latter decided to prove him a fact, with the intention of killing Sun. He turned to his associates who stood behind, order to reveal his true face. The dream commanded his warriors to stand up to weapons and be alert to battle. He accused the enemies, calling them abomination, who turned Chonvon 20 years ago into a real sea of blood. The dream decided to stop them here and now, not paying attention to any obstacles. Then he addressed his friend McVen with a questionful proposal addressed to him. The dream decided to take all the worries on himself, instructed McVen to survive and return to his home. However, McVen, with his pride, stated that he would fight side by side until the end. However, the dream was aware that if it really is part of the demonic sect, then this place will be the last refuge for all of them. He spent McVen to survive and bring the truth to Chonvon, because he only had a chance to get there unharmed. It was the last desire of the captain, and although McVen accepted him with bitter tears, he was determined to fulfill him. An incredible number of terrible events happened that day. The Bukro and its influence dissolved without a trace. At that moment, the Vash Ho focusedly continued to improve their skills. During his training, he did not stop emphasizing, a strong opponent who needs to be overcome. Today, he again directed his gaze on the boulder, who considered his fierce enemy, and today, he was about to put an end to his existence. Today, he decided to turn into another person, reviving his own strength and unwavering will. After straining and gathering all his power in his hands, he prepared for the jump. Gathering all the strength in the muscles of the legs, he powerfully pushed forward. He had to, like a ram, put his way directly to the boulder. Calling closer, he whispered quietly, "A piercing fist." His task is to instantly overcome any obstacle. He gathered all his strength and struck a stroke that achieved the goal. The stone began to crack, and small stones exploded in different directions. His hand gradually plunged deeper into the middle of the boulder, and finally he achieved the goal. A loud crash came, and the stone with a crack split. Behind him was a master who noted that his hard work and spilled tears were not in vain last year. He carefully laid his hand on the shoulder of the HO, noting that he had continuously made considerable efforts all this period. It was clear to the master that I have made a lot of effort, even more than anyone else. However, he also recalled that this stage is only a starting position that is already otherwise. He urged not to allow this to overshadow the mind. I will realize this, and even such a result had of great value to him. At that moment, the master realized that an unusual aura began to appear around him. It became clear to the master what the ladies referred to. He was determined to never allow himself to be humiliated again. The master was convinced that his faith would only be strengthened. He felt the ability to turn the lads into a true monster. Chan Munin forbade Hon Si to teach him the martial arts of Manhwa. However, in the arsenal of Haiyan, there was no suitable technique for ladies HO, so the order was not broken. It was the only way because I will give HO, his only student, and everything he did was dedicated to him. Last year, no one dared to conquer these mountains, and it is clear that the elders were not going to do so either. The Hod is not a helpless student who deserves pity. Without any doubt, it will turn into a real treasure of Hua Mountain. Consio did not feel any insults on the senior master. He understood that he went to a devoured learning along with his new student, Mion Gon. Kion did not even dream that Mion Gion would turn into a real resistance of Hua Mountain. The new day did not wait long. The Hod was thought to be even more effort, while it was rapidly rising up. He realized that more effort should be made to succeed. In a real duel, even imperfect technique will not benefit. The path to skill is still incredibly distant. Suddenly behind the boy arose and turned to him. I will give you respect and humility before the older brother. On the question of the Ho, what happened, he explained that Chang Munin ordered him to deliver his mentor to him. So I will go to the elder. He ordered Vona to stay here. She still felt a slight tremor every time her gaze faced the eyes of the ladies. It was unclear why the presence of the elder made him shyly embarrassed, although this feeling seemed unexpected. He could not figure out how the HO, who was prophesied by the eternal whom, suddenly recovered and started walking again. Who went that? Asked the voice from behind the door. Von Yol said his name and warmly congratulated the master. What brought you here? The master asked. Bon replied that this was the order of Chan Munin to bring him. And why did I need it? The master interrogated tirelessly. Von did not know the reason. He was only instructed to deliver him to Chan Munin. Being part of the majestic mountain of Hua, Kion was unable to neglect this instructions. I will decide to make him a company. 5 years have passed since Khan last admired this picturesque panorama, impressed with her beauty. He noted that the world remained unchanged, unlike his heart. He explained Juan that he would first go to Chikaveon's palace and asked him to follow him. They were already approaching, as suddenly a Kion and Hegun appeared on their way. They were quite amazed as they saw him. Among them, rumors began to spread that he may even lose the ability to walk. Immediately wondered how he got here. Mu was surprised by the absence of visits of the lads during last year. Then he wondered his well-being, and I will say that he had already recovered significantly. In addition, I said Ho noted that all this was achieved through the master. Unexpectedly, a female appeal was heard behind his back. "It seems you continue the student's way from Hua Mountain?" she asked. She was a girl with a playful look, and at the same time radiated a unique charm. Her name was Joni Soka, and she belonged to the Mudan sect. She appeared here with her mentor. The girl wondered in the ladies, or he is a student of Mount Hua. In response, he proudly noted that the elite of the students of the Hua Mountain. However, she had some suspicions, because she did not feel any energy, which usually characterizes the martial arts from the Hua Mountain. Mu told you that they arrived from the Mudan sect. In response, the lads asked what purpose they visited. However, it was not informed because their arrival was a complete surprise. She realized that they were counting on her independent answer to this question. However, this did not belong to the topics that can be discussed openly. Meanwhile, in the cozy inner garden of the palace Chkveon, Konsi was approaching Chanmunin and asked what purpose he was invited. One of the men explained that the third, who is near them, is John Heinen from the Mudan sect. They exchanged names and John Ho said his name. He noted that if Chanmunin is older than him, then his power should be phenomenal. However, the man confessed that as a scientist, he had no significant abilities, and wondered what the purpose came to the top of Hua. John Hu apologized for the sharpness in behavior, adding that he had come to ask for help from Mount Hua. Khan asked, "Do you need people from Hua Mountain?" "Yes, we need it," said John Ho. Then Khan wondered what could happen that they were so strongly asking for help. John Ho, with delight, began to describe the events that took place. And here, Chanmunin himself intervened, saying that they found traces of students of the demonic sect. "If it is really true, then all of us are a serious danger," he added. Kion was well aware of what a demonic sect was. "That's actually a demonic sect?" said Kion, and John Ho noted that it was worth checking. He noted that it is not necessary to declare the return of the demonic sect based only on a piece of paper which indicates their attack. They just needed support, because this place was the closest to Payak, which was destroyed. Jong Ho also said that the Chong sect sent us our representatives to help in this situation. Chanmunin approached Han and explained that John Ho appeared with a request from the Mudan sect to gather students. However, Khan could not understand why he was chosen. "You should definitely combine with them," Chanmunin replied. "After all, the knowledge and memories of Han are those treasures that are not available to everyone. Even if you do not have the art of battle, your sharp mind is striking," said Chanmunin. "You know how to recognize their traces among others." Kion was aware that this knowledge would not be wicked from his memory so easily. For Chon Ho, this conversation has become a real relief. He firmly believed that the Order of Huanshan, glorious with his desperate battles with dark forces, had the deepest knowledge of the demonic sect. However, Khan put forward one important condition. His only requirement was to be allowed to bring a student with him on this trip. After a brief pause, Chong Ho's request was approved, and they all moved forward. The only thing he needed was that everyone follows him. Sometimes he died on the spot, looking enthusiastically at the magic panorama of the Hua Mountain. The girl who followed the lads of the host paid attention to his lameness. Maybe he is injured? In her mind, she raged a whole storm of thoughts. Even with a powerful body to reach the peaks in the sphere of martial arts, it is more difficult to squeeze through the needle's ear. This is this world. And taking a prestigious position with a wounded leg is a task at times more difficult. They soon arrived in the home of Han Seo. He suggested bringing them something to eat, asking them to sit down and wait a little. Instead, he pulled the flask out of the inner pocket and noted that the spectacle is incredible and the wind is refreshing. Do you really need food in such conditions? It will be enough, he said, lifting a bottle of alcohol in the face of Han, who, of course, immediately refused. We do not drink drinks. We admire the natural beauty, Chongo said with a smile. It was a kind of challenge. In the meantime, the ladies traveled next to the SU, who apologized for the behavior of his mentor. After that, she wondered when he decided to become part of the community on Hua Mountain. He replied that it happened 6 years ago. It seemed to her that it happened literally yesterday. At the same time, she felt a loneliness gradually enveloping him because he remained alone in this distant corner of the world. However, he confidently reassured her, emphasizing that everything is fine because the teacher was always nearby. She noted that his relationship with Hua Mount was far from perfect. He seemed to spend a lot of time together, avoiding other students. And in these circumstances, the passionate reviews of beautiful alcohol did not subscribe. When he was approaching, he noted that a bottle of alcohol is already shining in his hands. He seems to be unable to restrain himself, and his eyes were already shining like a mirror surface. I will just ask how things were. The master responded in surprise, asking why everything was turning around. And immediately his path led to a sudden immersion in the unknown. Chongho was puzzled, because he believed that he gave very little to drink. Only 3 sips, and what a stunning reaction. The lady lifted him on his back to move inside. Siu also appealed to her mentor So to reduce alcohol. Turning his back, the master leaving the room slowly, noting that time has come to cleanse the mind. So, he addressed his student to the question of what she really thinks about the ladies. She said that, in her opinion, he looks quite adequate. Chongho was amazed hearing the word normal. She noted that his damaged leg is just a little important detail, but his character seems somewhat cold and does not cause a threat at all. After hearing, he grabbed the opinion. She is extremely naive. He then suggested that she turn away for a few seconds, interested in asking if she noticed what he pointed to. At the level of adult growth, a small target of the target was visible on a large boulder. He pointed to the traces of the blow that remained at this target. In addition, it is not possible to neglect the traces found only 20 feet from the boulder, even with those that were right before them. Chongho noted that, unlike what she considered the Gyu, she did not need help at all like a little child. He noted that one who trained more than 10,000 times should not pity. Hua Mountain impresses both with its grandeur and unknown depth. She asked herself whether it was really 10,000 times to repeat the exercise, and this thought seemed to her just fantastic. And at the same time, she could not understand how she did not pay attention to this obvious fact. It all happened because she concentrated all her attention solely on his leg and lame course. As a rule, when meeting with martial arts masters from the Mudan sect, she carefully follows them, easily recognizing their unique combat style. Considering this stone, she finally realized why the teacher decided to bring her here. Meanwhile, far beyond the Rocky Mountains, the palace of Chakaveon magnified. Everyone fussed in the preparatory hassle, because the departure was already on the doorstep. A group of students leveled in front of an elder, ready to follow him. Mukan and Ongen promised to provide him with protection. Just imagine, in this trip that can hide unprecedented threats, they are instructed to accompany it. It was because of this that Qian-chan saw an extraordinary care and caution in the elder. The act itself was set to go for the sake of the prosperity of Hua Mountain. It was at this moment that the master called to get closer to come. He was behind him and went closer to a few steps. Herbling was suspicious of his eyes and asked if he intended to join them. I will turn to the eldest, expressing his desire to join this adventure. The giant remarked to the master that it was too risky and suggested leaving the lad here. He noted that in the case of unforeseen circumstances, it would not be easy for them to follow both. Mu instantly quenched health, explaining that the statements of such a grade were unacceptable in the presence of an elder. However, the interlocutor stood on his own, assuring that he was saying the sincere truth. The master, not having the desire to spend time on these discussions, solemnly stated that the moment had come. Everyone gathered for departure. They are waiting for the next stop, Chenin. Not giving themselves a moment to a break, they moved on the way, stepping into unison. Under the leadership of Han, the group has already reached Ingangan. It was at this place that a planned meeting with the delegates of the Chonam sect was waiting for them. This center had a history associated with the Mudan sect, as the incident once happened, after which the owner of Ungangana remained in their debt. Chongho explained that it was because of this debt that their cooperation became inevitable. Mu unexpectedly realized that once the Ungjan was influenced by the Hua Mountain, he could not even imagine that another sect would take this place and set his base here. The power of the Hua Mountain has weakened significantly, said a chunky man, and they both went forward. They met, exchanging greetings, like teenagers who first saw at school. Chonvan approached Chongho with a smile and showed his respect, greeted him as his older brother. "Do you manage things in the Chonam sect?" Chongo asked. Having gratitude, he noted how skillfully everything was organized. There were conversations at the tables about the arrival of the great martial arts master from the Mudan sect. Chongho Chinin, who was considered the greatest Hubei sword, was the center of attention. Chonvan entered the room here and announced that it was time for them to go out to greet it. They appeared on the street and, bowing their heads, politely greeted the masters. For them, it was a huge honor to greet the most prominent swordfish of the sect of Mudan. A one-eyed man noted that he sees the prospect of studying in the future with great expectations. However, in response, it was not a matter of praise. He subsequently introduced them to Han Co. and also introduced the rest of the attendees. During the acquaintance, he noted that Chongho belongs to the sect from the Hua Mountain, which gained glory with severe traditions and placed in a chance where their approach was just as strict. A man with a bandage on his eye was named Junhwa. He noted that he was genuinely happy to meet. The next participant called the Him Hans. Gim and Mu were looked at. Gim was aware that he was faced with the most talented student from the Hua Mountain, while Mu noted in Gima the future sect of Chonam. At this point, Chonvan realized that it was time to finish dating. He looked at the elders, smiled slightly, and suggested that they leave the young alone, and the most comfortable sitting for a glass in a friendly company. They became friends who will now go on a trip side by side. Understanding how important it is to find a common language, Gim suggested that everyone lift everyone on a glass. Meanwhile, while they continued their conversation, the ladies watched the majestic silhouette of Thebek Mountain, which was clearly drawn on the distant horizon. His heart was anxious because he was again in this place. His face was talking about anxiety without words. The master noted it and warned that if he passed this place, then in the future he may be sorry. They had a little time, so he advised to give you how to take this opportunity as long as she still has. The ladies expressed his sincere gratitude for the opportunity given, assured that he would not slow down and return in the shortest possible time. The ladies went to the gate and Sak paid attention to it. She did not delay. She approached him and wondered what way he intended to go. When he did not answer, she asked again if he had everything. The lady turned his head and asked, interested, that she was meant. She decided that his mood had ruined the absence of an invitation to the table, but the real reason was completely different. If he was inconvenient to stay here, she advised to go to the Mudan sect, because there was also a hotel book. He expressed gratitude to her, but noted that he still had unfinished things to do. So he headed to the gate and left the territory. The guard there also wondered for what reason he left the premises and does not interfere with something. I wondered if there was a free horse that could be sat. He asked again if a horse could use. The guard did not hesitate. The owner ordered him to support any available methods. He showed him a couple of horses and asked him to return them to the knight. Picking up on his horse and starting his rise, I remembered his father's words. Always focus on Tebek Mount if you want to return home when you get lost. It was his first stay in the saddle, and he boldly headed to the majestic mountain that stood in front of him. There was no shadow of fear in the look. A certain amount of time has passed. and now he travels among trees that proudly rise on mountain slopes. He gently patted his horse around his neck, passionately saying that he was a real fellow. Going an unknown mountain trail, he gently patted his horse around his neck and asked him to stay still. This space was imbued with memories as he constantly walked after his father. Although many years have passed, every tree was still in memory, which proudly stood on the side of the path. Under his feet, the leaves were gently rustling when he sat down and gently touched his hand. From the top of the steep slope, he cast his gaze down. It spreads a field covered with grass and ruins, which preserved the memory of the former lives of people in this place. In his mind, the images of father and mother came. His breathing became accelerated, and his heart was loudly broken by a frantic rhythm. Without holding tears, he whispered quietly, "The gave ho returned home." The unbearable pain jumped by him suddenly, so he fell on his knees. Grasping his fingers into his fist, he still couldn't understand. He was unclear why fate decided to pick up his father. Why, when more than 100 people were killed, no one was excited. No one even tried to find out who was actually standing for this thought. Having taken this position, the ladies solemnly promised himself, always remember it and keep in his heart. The land of the hum responded to the blows of the hooves as the riders were breaking forward, trying to get to the pass as soon as possible. They drove the horses forward, pushing them at a faster pace. The Mudan sect had already paved the road, only it was necessary to get to the Yemen's pass quickly. It was a shelter for tired travelers. "I will give ho in the company of others." He got on his horse just at the entrance. "However, they are strongly warned. You should be alert even within the hotel, because the Mago clan is quite close. They were informed that returning home could happen no faster than 6 months, and possibly, and all year long, their home will remain unattainable. If luck smiles in full, they may not return at all, because it was a gate between Junuyuan and the outside world." At this time, Changho approached Han and noted that it was necessary to meet with those who sent a letter from the area. However, he emphasized that since the last letter of communication with him has disappeared. Changho sought that he became their leader to the city where the legendary Battle of Mago once took place. He stressed the need to give students the opportunity to rest. Considering the uncertainty of the future, Khan suggested that everyone rest. 2 Changho warriors sat down and started talking about how the ladies, having such a physical form, became one of the most prominent students. Some of them noted that on Hua Mountain he is also sometimes called a lame doe. In other words, he was like a dog that could not run, and one of the fighters only hoped that the ladies would not do a disaster. At this moment, Khan walked next to the ladies, climbing the stairs up. The teacher told him that this world could be too ruthless when people are only evaluated by their appearance, and it causes horror. "I apologize, it's my fault, I will say," Kion said with sadness. "I am so helpless that I couldn't do you anything." It seemed that as a result the attitude towards him was with hidden hostility. The master realized that it was time to make a choice that would allow the ladies to take a step forward. He said to him, "Hua Mountain rises to heaven, but her width is lacking to reach me." The master understood that he had no other way out but to stay on Hua Mountain, regardless of his desires. But the ladies were different. The ladies listened to the teacher, absorbing his every word. He did not stop and added, "What if Mount Hua rejected you?" He noted that in such circumstances, the ladies would lose any reason to stay true to her. After this unforgettable trip, he asked to go to New World research. The ladies were amazed. He could not imagine that such words would come down from the mouth of his mentor. He emphasized again that ladies should constantly strive for independence. Hua Mountain remains its majestic mountain, and you are you with your unique way. Come when your soul is burning a relentless determination, a stable, as if the frowns of Hua Mountain. "So let's drink together as it should," the master said to him. The conversation was over, and a new day began. Changho stepped to the shed, which at first glance looked completely deserted. During his stay there, he suddenly said, "I'm aware that you are following me." Then he introduced himself. "I am Changho, from the Mudan sect." He assured that there was no reason for fear, and suggested that he just go out. Suddenly, a light rustle came behind. Chong-ho sharply looked down. A man suddenly appeared, and Chong-ho wondered if he had any difficulties. With the eye hidden under the bandage, the body of the young warrior was fluttering with numerous scratches. The only thing he was able to say is none of his comrades withstood the battle. Chong-ho put his hand on his friend's shoulder and said with relief, "Thank God, at least you saved." The man told that they were monitored for an hostile base. Holding the sword firmly, Chong-ho wondered if he was really the remains of a demonic clan. Grasping his teeth, he told that he heard how they mentioned the cult. He noted that only the Mago clan in Hanho is capable of expressing such words. The Northern Road Agency was destroyed, and he pleaded with Chong-ho to give him the opportunity to embody a fair revenge for them. He pleaded with a loud voice to give him this opportunity. At the same time, a hefty man rushed to Han. He dissolved the door and announced that the owner Chong-ho ordered to prepare for the battle and go on the way. Hyon was surprised by this situation because during this period it looked unusual. However, Herbling emphasized Chong-ho's words once again, emphasizing that it requires urgent attention. The master immediately ordered the giving to prepare for the departure. The giant asked the gamble if he should stay so that he was not a burden for the team. Considering that his presence could only harm, he recommended to stay with all others. However, HK could not allow his teacher to be at danger on his own. Although a chunky man considered him a stubborn new moon, he still had a stuck in his opinion. If he is so self-assured, he recommended to exercise caution. For the first time, the ladies perceived these words as a genuine guidance from the elder. He swallowed hard, trying to get rid of the lumps of saliva that approached his throat. Subsequently, they went along the mountain trails on an exciting journey. Capturing horses, they demanded from them increasing speed. They had a clear idea of the location of the enemy base and the exact direction of their movement. They found themselves on red, wild expanses that ranged behind the passage of Yeoman. They were tasked with crossing the Yemen's Passion as soon as possible, remaining unnoticed to the enemy. This place, located at the very top of the gorge, was called a concern. Nguyegon came to the boss with news. Someone is watching them. He noted that it is most likely a consequence of the previous fight. It turned out that among people from the agency of supporting Northern Road is the survivor. "Did Captain Chong not mention that he would do it?" said the boss. He later clarified who pursues them. "The Mudan sect, Hua Mountain, and Chonam," said Novgon. The boss realized that if 3 of the 9 significant sects have already taken care of their persecution, it can be a harbinger that everyone is being activated soon. As soon as the 9 mighty sects, they will collect strength. They will be supported by 5 prominent families, and they will move through the whole society. He clearly realized that they were not able to fight the whole world at the moment, so he decided that the best solution would retreat. Novgon was in surprise to ask if he really intends to leave the honest hell. The boss was aware that they would still have to do so. The only thing that has changed is the terms. Now it is necessary to do it faster than they planned. However, even after leaving this place, they have to prepare an unusual gift for guests. The guests were already standing just before their cave. Chong-ho cleverly jumped out of his horse, looking carefully at the terrain. His gaze unmistakably captured the signs of life, which indicated that this place was not deserted. The purity around was an integral proof of the vigilance of their opponents. Due to the danger on Chong-ho roads, he decided that it was necessary to continue on foot. Suddenly, 2 soldiers announced that they had come across something interesting. They were convinced that they found the carts of the cart. The moment did not pass, as all other participants gathered around, looking at the amazing find. Is this really a mago? There was only one question for which they had almost 90% of confidence. Then MU instructed the lad, along with the rest of the students, to protect the teacher. He insisted that the owner would go immediately, as soon as there was a confidence that he was mago. Konso hesitated, and MU expressed that he was the will of his mentor. He asked to entrust the fight of the Mudan sect, emphasizing that security should remain the main priority. As a commander, MU noted that when the battle is healed, the retreat should not be avoided when needed. Hanso nodded in agreement, although his dissatisfaction broke out inside him. For others, it was a source of unconcealed admiration. Everyone tried to show their abilities, hoping that their names would be heard on the whole honcho. One of them boasted his ability to destroy the leader Mago with only one blow, but suddenly his mysterious sound. The sound was reminiscent of the whistle of the wind, from Mago in their direction, welcoming souvenirs. The sharp, as if sharpened, the blade hit one of the students, instantly overthrowing it. It turned out that they were trapped. Everyone was ordered to be careful. As soon as they realized that they were trapped, it was ordered to be pressed into the ground. The problem is that not everyone has time to complete this task. Just in their eyes, another warrior fell. Ho returned to Chongho with the question of what to do next. When Chongho noticed a group of people, he urged his comrades restrained. Nwegon stood in front of the group, hearing a spooky laughter. Chongho turned to a warrior who has already met these strangers before. "Are you sure they are with Mago?" Without hesitation, he confirmed that they were them, instantly recognizing them. The enemy attacked, capturing their valuable stocks. A passionate light of revenge on the dead brothers broke out inside him. Nwegon was quietly laughing at his face, watching the man crazy. Recognizing that leaving him is dangerous, Choncho decisively ordered others to follow him. They were informed that it was necessary to destroy enemies without regret, and to disperse with them. As if one gigantic fist, they all rushed forward, keeping weapons ready. He was headed by a warrior who, having lost his hand in the previous battle, was already burning with a thirst for retribution. However, the opponents did not intend to let their swords out of their hands. He stood courageously in front of him, and immediately behind him, Vonal, who was instructed to protect the ladies of Ho and his friends. He stressed that the master should remain among the living. At the same moment, Mago's emissary began to demand to demonstrate their power. The battle was burning, and Mu was preparing for the inevitable, ready to kill. However, something continuously worried him. It was a restless anxiety, which was increasingly covering his heart. During each step on the battlefield, he sincerely turned to God with prayer. Mu was a forgiveness for these murders, as all this was done for the sake of establishing peace in Hanho. The followers of the demonic cult felt great confidence in their own power. They firmly believed that no one who dared to prevent them would avoid the inevitable death. Mu, with an indiscriminate expression, he skillfully repelled the blows, one by one. Unexpectedly, the enemy dropped on the back. Scattering them, Mu considered it as an opportunity to demonstrate that Hua Mountain is still capable of something majestic. He acted in order to return Hua Mountain to her former grandeur and authority. Blood splashed in all sides, leaving behind red prints. With a casual expression on his face, he confidently stepped forward. Take a look at the greatness of Hua Mountain. Feel its unconquered power. The Chongho master, surrounded by fighters, showed the impressive fencing skills, quite in accordance with his title of unsurpassed swordsman Hubei. Every time his sword was swinging in the air, someone certainly fell down. The lines that emerged from his movements in the air were distinguished by extraordinary equality and smoothness. They were not only dangerous but also deadly, forcing enemies not to deviate from the order. His posture radiated confidence and powerful energy. Despite the threat from Mago, Junyuani still has a confident elite. As a real commander, Junwad had told the Gima to free up the way. He could not allow the Chonom sect to lose their position. Without a second, the Jim hastened to put the order into life. With dedication, which was compared to the combat passion of the commander on the battlefield, he gave in this case. By showing the power of his divine water blade, he fought with enemies without knowing pity. During the battle, he declared to the enemies that to preserve life, it was better for them to flee from this place. There was no space for mercy in Chonam. Junatu brilliantly proved his advantage, with one blow cut off the enemy's leg. The zeal of the battle was gradually growing, and strict orders were heard. No mercy, not to leave enemies with the living. With the light of determination in the eyes, I will give a fist firmly. He was persuaded to move away, assuring that the students would protect their teacher themselves. He was instructed to retreat with the master and guarantee his safety. This time he strongly sought to demonstrate his abilities. He tied his fate with a dangerous but noble task, to protect the master in the name of the majestic mountain of Hua in the face of this ruthless group of murderers. The battle unfolded to incredible size, and the gorge gradually turned into a bloody arena. And suddenly a mysterious figure appears before his eyes. All the surrounding ones immediately felt its energy. It was amazingly powerful. The Hod also noticed this fact. "And who is it?" asked others, covered by genuine interest. Some were so frightened that he even felt their throat shrinking against cold horror. The horror that caused the approach of this figure was simply impressive. The students were instructed to stay in positions, and they were lined up in a formation known as a blade of 7 stars. However, it seems that the stranger did not bother. He suddenly rolled into the thickets of the crowd that stood in front of him, aiming the swords on the opponents. Once he approached, as he began to flown the incredible warmth from his hand, his energy with which he attacked radiated a cozy heat. It was absolutely impossible to resist these blows. He was laying them one by one, as if there were no obstacles before him. Everyone who was on his way noticed only the lightning agility of his hands. His skill in managing his own body was astonishing, so much that it seemed as if she had obeyed every desire. The enemies fell one by one under his pressure, leaving behind only helpless bodies scattered down. Although he shuddered, he still squeezed the sword in his hands with relentless determination. He swung for a blow, but the enemy cleverly evaded. His legs broke away from the ground, and he climbed into the sky. The stranger was preparing to strike from a height. She just stood and followed how he quickly came closer. Suddenly, a familiar figure polished near a huge boulder appeared before his eyes. "Vanol, take your hands," a quiet but confident voice came. After that, the HO gave all his strength into his fist and hit the enemy. It was a powerful and merciless blow from whom everyone was considered hopeless on Hua Mountain, from a person whom no one believed in. The HO gave a striking shot that caused a wave of energy that spilled in all sides. Lying on the ground, he was surprised and shouting, "Brother!" All students who witnessed this spectacle were no less surprised. None of the audience could grasp how he managed to carry out such incredibly powerful equipment. Lady Ho began to come closer to the enemy. The stranger and no idea did not have to repel his attack. From under his mask, the ladies heard a female voice who exclaimed, "How did you laugh?" Sticking from the ground, she concentrated even more in her hand and rushed straight to the side of the ladies. Master Keon responded to the student, calling him not to lose vigilance. It was a Mago technique known as a burning fist of twilight. Her outlines were doubled in her eyes when she was approaching closer to the ladies. "I will give you skillfully pair each blow, masterfully maneuvering with his hands." However, its pressure was truly stunning. The master, looking back, felt the 20th anniversary, but the inner voice assured him, "Many people on the Hua Mountains have already suffered a tragic limb through this technique." For other students, it was the first time they heard about the legendary burning fist of Twilight Mago. However, now they looked at with their own eyes. With this powerful energy before the eyes of the lady lay a solid diaper. The light blinded him, but he collects all his efforts to concentrate and withstand attacks. As if on a battlefield, hundreds of soldiers raged. Their actions were so lightning. Although his movement was lightning, the ladies constantly supported the defense. The stones under their feet flew in all sides of the stunning power of blows. The rest just contemplated, realizing that it is not necessary to interfere with the fight, not to become an obstacle. They did not cease to amaze how the HO ladies easily reflect such powerful attacks. Is the lad now used the technique of bamboo leaves? He was convinced that all Hua Mountains mastered this technique. However, his fist of bamboo fist was much more sluggish. He did not have enough power to resist the graceful arts of magic. In addition, the ladies of Ho Ho had a broken leg. It even turned him into an exile on Hua Mountain. And yet he evades, reflects, and resists the burning fist of twilight. He thought to himself, can it be that during this time the ladies hid their true abilities? And while he delved into his reflections, the battle did not subside, and the lady, meanwhile, got a serious blow to the core. After the impact, it was covered with a feeling of acid in the mouth, which rose from the depths of the stomach. However, he managed to maintain balance while remaining on one leg. Having settled behind, he asked the ladies to allow him to join. However, the ladies only cast a quick look and asked everyone to move back. Keep behind with the teacher. "He is not a rival for you," said Ho-Ho. His words were proudly proud, and he immediately realized everything. The ladies expressed this as a command, acting as the main student of the Hua Mountain. He ordered them to leave this place. This situation became absolutely unexpected for her, and words that would like to say as if they were dissolving in the air. Keon categorically rejected the proposal, assuring that he would not move out of his place without his presence. "The teacher, I understand that you never ask me, but now I ask you, go. I will join you soon." With his heart pressed with his chest, I will promise him solemnly. He understood that he was obliged to keep this promise without hesitation. In the end, Keon succumbed to the belief that his promise would be fulfilled. The soldiers standing behind the lads began to retreat, clearly executing his team. Once alone with her opponent, she asked if he was a student of Hua Mountain. The guy confirmed. She heard these words. She replied with an icy voice, "Here is a pity." At that moment, the ladies wondered if she came from Mago. Slowly removing the mask, she whispered, "It really calls us the world." Dipping the mask, she reported that their name was Shingo. She explained that the term Mago is synonymous with the cult of evil, while shining symbolizes the cult of God. "Then what did Shingo forget here?" he asked with unburdened curiosity. She said that this place is called the Long AD, their base, which serves as a big prison for sinners. The lady plunged into her words, catching every intonation and content of what he said. It was their last shelter, the last place for the repository, but today it was discovered. She acknowledged that some conceived Junyuju's retribution, although this opinion has not all supporters. Hearing the mention of some, the ladies wondered if those who did not seek revenge remained. "Doing anything," she answered with a shade of indifference. After that, she asked what his name was. She justified her interest in the fact that he would become her first victim, so she wanted to know his name at least. Going to her, limping, ladies called his name. "I will never forget you, give you Ho," she whispered, recommended as a Yu-Gi-On. At that moment, she was preparing to perform the last blow of the burning fist of twilight, flowing white lotus. It is difficult to say that the ladies did not want to be at this event. As if a ram on the closed gates of the fortress, I will move forward. He was rapidly gaining a course, increasing the power of his attack every step. He pushed as confident as he did it thousands of times before the rock. The skillfully mastered technique of heavenly improvement immediately involved all the muscles of his fist. However, it continued to continuously shorten the distance between them. Her fist of burning dusk was shining with a force filled with restless energy. However, the blow of a current white lotus was just as dangerous as the previous one. The ladies did not hesitate or restrained. He immediately used his penetrating fist. They were so unexpectedly approached that they tried to evade at the same time. She was already standing behind him. The gap cast his gaze over his shoulder. Suddenly, crunching heard, and his forcefully squeezed in his throat, causing a suffocating cough. The unbearable pain of his body, like a heavy fog without giving a drop of relief. She rolled past, and her blow struck him with incomprehensible power. And she looked at her body with no less longing in her eyes. It was engulfed by unbearable pain, penetrating each piece of body. Blood flowed from the cut wounds that covered her body. She also coughed, feeling pain from internal injuries. At this point, the ladies are already spread out on the ground, biting their lips from unbearable pain. She stood looking carefully and intently into his face. She was aware that if the blow was a little stronger, her hand would not withstand this test. She never knew the fear of such a scale before. Now she was the one whose presence released these horrors. She thought, "How sorry I have to kill him." She bowed to him, and with a slight apology on her mouth asked for forgiveness. Hearing this, the ladies asked her not to speak as if he had already left this world. Watching him, she noticed his eyes glowing with vital energy. His eyes flashed with incredible determination. It was unclear how he was able to act in such a state. She was again sad. How sorry I have to deprive him of his life. The lady has already stood up, and her attention was attracted by the sound that heard. "Well, it began," she whispered, exhaling. "What happened?" asked. Then he suddenly noticed how something rapidly rushed directly to him. This unknown grabbed Yugyeon for the waist. She only had time to say in a quiet whisper, "It's time to go," when the new suddenly appeared on the slope and instantly pulled it to her. He warned her that everything had started and advised to run away from here as soon as possible. I will have stopped, looking at them when his hearing suddenly struck a sharp crack. The stones around the roar began to crumble on both sides of the gorge. Near Chongho, he realized that he had bombs. A representative of Mago gathered nearby, noting, "We all are waiting for death. In this world, there will still be no place for us, so we will die together," he said, as if the doom was the only alternative. They interweaved their hands in prayer to the sacred flame of eternity, begging him for freedom. They promised that they were fully given to this business, and will always stay with him. Chongho felt a shock, almost losing the ability to speak, not believing that they actually mean it seriously. However, they did not stop asking the eternal divine flame for liberation. Their energy was so impressive that the stones flew into the air under their feet. They were ready to sacrifice themselves. The students and masters concluded that the only way to save is to disappear immediately. There was no time to delay. It was necessary to act immediately and go away. MU instructed his brother to take the students to a safe place. If they were delayed for a moment, it could cost them life. It was necessary to run without delay. When the Soha rushed away, she did not leave her thoughts. She whispered her eyes and was barely audibly whispered, "I am sorry to the depths of my soul." Chongho cast his gaze back and saw Gamble and his serious condition, but he was aware that he could not help. There was no moment to be lost, and finally even the giant noticed the ladies. He immediately stated that he needed help. However, he gently put his hand on his shoulder and said he was too late. Hello turned and with adhesive confidence stated that for them, a lady is a family, and they simply cannot leave it. Mu denied, pointing out that although the ladies play a significant role, its significance does not exceed others. There is nothing more expensive than Hua Mountain. At the same moment, Mu grabbed him by his shoulder and decisively ordered him to flee without spending time. The giant was silently apologizing to the ladies, realizing that it made him not want the presence of that in their team. He was aware that it was not necessary to count on forgiveness. Ladies remained on his knees, wrapped in bitter awareness of what is happening. He was impressed that he remained alone in the middle of the thunder, which was lifted from the rock. The whole mountain was destroyed, and the word hell turned to him into a bitter reality. The ladies were clamped under the thickness of the earth and stones. He had no idea how much time he went. His eyes were involuntarily revealed, and the first thing that was distinguished in the mind was unbearable pain. It seemed that his body was about to fly into pieces. Fortunately, despite the pain, he could still move. However, everything that unfolded before his gaze was immersed in boundless darkness. Nothing around was visible. The beginning of his speech consisted only of the alarming question, "Where is I?" Who is left here without being able to get out? Other masters and students only silently watched the debris. They remained the only true followers of the Mudan sect. Chongho was amazed that the enemies decided on a reckless attack, similar to suicide. Tightly clasped his fingers with the sword, he looked at it with a bitter longing in his heart. Gim was looking for positive moments, noting that at least it was possible to prevent the enemy from strengthening his position. Junatu said to agree, adding that it probably destroyed the last remnants of Mago members. At this moment, Kion, folding from pain, stood on the next breakage, shouting in despair. Behind him, Mu was begging for forgiveness, saying that they were doing their best to save the ladies, but time was already ruthless. The health was in pain when he heard it. Through the high-profile shoes of the master, this pain has penetrated his mind. He was aware that without a lady their lives would have long been broken. They would all fall underground because of their own infirmity. He could not stand, and the insults himself rolled on his cheeks. However, Kion could not accept the idea that the lady was gone. He convinced himself that his son could not leave this world so simply. Full of hope, he looked down. He said quietly, "You would never die just like that." Meanwhile, while under a bunch of debris, The ladies could not determine how much time had passed since all had disappeared. It really became a challenge. And then suddenly a stone was shown before his eyes, emitting the nightlight. They claimed that these items are invaluable, but it seemed incredibly unusual. Can it be a creation of human hands? I thought, and here his thoughts were moved to Yu-Gi-On. He comprehended that it was their base. The ladies also remembered the words she spoke, how they prefer not to call Mago, but Singo. He resumed every word of their conversation in memory when they stood face to face. Asking the question, I asked her which brought here Singio. She said, "This is a concern. It serves both our base and a huge prison for sinners belonging to singing." Full of determination to get up, ladies gradually began to understand where he found himself. He realized that the impenetrable darkness reigns inside, and as it was expected, the fresh breath of air was not reached here. To get out of here is like going through hell. The task is not easy. Fortunately, he was illuminated by stones that glittered in night darkness. When you find yourself in a closed space, water and food are the most important resources. Since it is a Bumagatskaya house, there should be something that will help survive. Walking through the streets, he noted that this city was much larger than he could imagine. Going further, he noticed the traces of the presence of life. Walking the corridor, he suddenly found himself in front of the training room. Having gone around, he carefully examined the entire area. Thanks to preliminary training, the lamps gradually restored his strength, which allowed him to stand more on his feet. He paid attention to several boxes on the left of himself. He stretched and gently began to shift the lid of one of them. Inside, there were tiny balls resembling pills. He carefully took one of them into his palm. Lift to his nose, he felt a seductive aroma. Although there were still doubts on the face of whether to eat it, he was satisfied at heart. They were probably kept in stock. There were so many of them that it should provide a certain stock for a long period. At that moment, the ladies recalled the wise instructions from his teacher. Only unwavering determination can open the gates of heaven. The lady was waste of time. It was not possible to say whether a week had passed, or possible, he flew for a whole month. It is likely that it has passed all year long. An unexpected guest, a snake, found herself among these ruins, crawling through abandoned walls. She made an almost inaudible long sound. However, her path ended when I will easily destroy it with one hand. The lady felt as if at least 5 years have passed because it seemed to him that his body was no longer growing. Although he did not know his exact age, the cessation of growth indicated that he had already reached adulthood. The most interesting thing is that, despite all past years, it still remained underground. A caught snake became a wonderful delicacy for him. The sinister noise of the steps was spilled with a narrow cave, increasing the feeling that an invisible visitor was hiding here. The sound that sounded from under the stones increased with tension and increased the feeling of threat. The ladies moved slowly, carefully choosing every step in a cold half-past. The rhythmic movements of his right foot crashed into memory, without effort to touch the earth, while the left remained behind, as if fascinated. The left leg weaves after the right, giving it the steps of a bizarre and restless rhythm. His gait was marked by such an unusual frequency and rhythm of steps that seemed even more bizarre and threatening. They passed minutes and hours, and the exit remained a barrier pile of earth and stone, hopelessly overlapping the path to return. The cave was clamped in the Mararas. I did not feel discomfort. He overcame this path with his eyes closed, because he knew every bend. The lady laid this route countless times, having learned by heart every pebble and every stalactite hanging from the ceiling. He stopped in front of a cellar in which Mago warriors who once owned this cave hid 10,000 gold coins. When Mago settled in a closed adu, this place turned into a hiding place for martial arts foley. Well, they took with them all the important techniques, leaving behind only those who considered in vain, such as explosive triple shadow stroke and a wide destructive lung. The lady gently removed from the shelf a book called Explosive Triple Shadow Stroke, which he read already countless times. Everything related to this technique was recorded in his memory as a long-standing, reliable friend. I will give you relief that he found a lesson that helped him escape from loneliness. It took a long time before I will decide to go to a place that was even gloomy than a dungeon with 10,000 gold coins. The rocks turned into broken fragments scattered around, as if witnesses to the ancient battle. Their death did not result in the element. They were destroyed by another's hand that made a lot of effort to erase them. Suddenly, a powerful gust of wind risen in the cave, hinting at the empty space behind a stone curtain. The wind was unpleasant, like a devil's whisper that he was illuminated by the lads, just as an otherworldly warning. Despite the icy wind, which had to work through it, the faces of the HO had remained impermeable, as if all the emotions had gone away in it. The Gavhohat shook the stones that stood in his way, opening the road to the unknown. Before the eyes, the unknown area is spread, a huge darkness and filled with mysterious secrets. Before his look, the endless ending, a dark lake whose depth reached about 10 meters, so deep that even stalactites were lost in its impenetrable darkness. This indicated that the water seamlessly found the path to the leak, hiding its movement from our eyes. The HO gave a place when the feeling of hunger burned his insides, pushing to the border between life and death. When all the food supplies for the cultivators were exhausted, he had to quench his hunger, eating moss. The sharp hunger was so tormented by him that he even began to think about biting his hand. He overcame all the difficulties, fighting bloody obstacles, sweat and tears, and finally found a cherished storage. In the deep waters of the gloomy lake, amazing fish flooded that emitted light. Their transparent bodies were reminiscent of mysterious ghosts, through which it was easy to see even fragile bones. The HO ladies remained in ignorance of how long the fish lived in the pond and how they found themselves there. The most important thing was that these fish developed unique adaptations that allowed them to survive in the depths of the cave. He instantly grabbed one with his hands, skillfully caught it from the depths of dark waters. I will take him, and, without exposing any trim, began to bite, enjoying each subsequent piece. He tore her flesh with his sharp teeth, quenching his long hunger. When he completed, only naked bones remained on the ground. However, it became clear that their gastronomic preferences did not end. Sitting on the frozen earth, I will suddenly hear some unexpected sound. His ear caught a barely audible long sound that was constantly approaching. I was a wonderful creature in front of me, a mysterious beetle, similar to the scarab that arose from the shadow of the cave at sunset. The beetle, like the fish, glowed in the dark, which allowed it to notice even in absolute darkness. In a close hug cave, each sound became louder, knocking on the moon and filling the space around. And so when Skabai broke a quiet silence with his moving step, at that moment, because of the stones, a little more unusual, a huge mantis appeared in front of him, whose body shone like fireflies in the darkness of the night. The huge eyes of the mantis expressed surprise. It was evident that he did not expect to meet a living soul in this harsh twilight. The need for food was acute, so insects had to constantly argue for their existence, which in turn aroused the interest of the ladies to their clashes for survival. Bogomol rushed to the attack first, his hut, like a sickle, ruthlessly flashed in a sophisticated style of martial arts. The claw paw, without any hesitation, struck the neck of the scarab, causing a deadly blow to her victim. However, the scarab's body leaned smoothly at an angle, as if a bold warrior, cleverly avoiding the blow. Due to the ingenuity and a successful defense strategy, a strong scarab's shell managed to repel the manta's attack, nullifying his blow. The battle was going on, igniting the thirst for everyone to overcome the opponent in this constant struggle for survival. The angry praying mantis fiercely waved his paws, hoping to take out the enemy with one strong movement. Suddenly, Skabai unfolded his wings, introducing a new touch into his defensive strategy. His wings were shimmering at such a sophisticated speed that the human eye could not catch them, repeating the rapid attacks of the mantis. I will give Hoy, fascinated by the observation of this confrontation, was stunned by the absolute virtuosity of defense art. Even alone in this cave, he rapidly improved his skills in martial arts, carefully sanding equipment. The gloomy underground dungeon, where the walls are stored by the echo of ancient battles, turned to him into a single hiding place for training and rest. His lying on a cold tile required a constant struggle for heat preservation, because only the continuous blood flow could protect against the piercing cold. The word was carved on the wall, "I buried my friend here," a reminder of who was here before. Every time he opened his eyes, this inscription served as a silent companion in his loneliness. The home lady remained in the ignorance of the fate of the one who left these words, but the only thing that really worried him now is to survive and find a way to get out of here. After leaving his shelter, he descended into the platform, where he came across a huge block that seemed to be guarding the path, as if she were an indomitable watchman. The stone is moved by numerous dents that testify to ancient battles and training. Once a boulder was equal, like a mirror, but now years and efforts were reflected on its surface, leaving traces of time. I will give Ho-Ho, carefully inspecting the stone, immediately realized that the cause of these dents. The stone flew in different directions, as if a dry tree that cracks under pressure. The blows were not flying from the right, but from the left leg, which emphasized the skill of the ladies. And so, accelerating to maximum speed, he brought this boulder to a state of a pile of debris. Stone fragments were scattered around like dangerous glass fragments. The powerful gnash flew by the moon from the walls of the cave, awakening a feeling of threat. Each new blow constantly expanded the cracks in the boulder, spreading more and more. With each new movement, cracks were intertwined more and more, provoked in different directions. The final chord of a powerful offensive lady's HK crossed his last blow. The bright hum was cut by the cave. The power of the impact was so powerful that the moon was filled with every corner from his chips, reminding of his destructive power. The stone split into pieces like a fragile shell, while the lad's fist remained intact and durable. This impressive technique combined a piercing fist, a triple shadow stroke, and a destructive lung, forming a completely new, incredibly powerful technique. His divine cultivation received new dimensions, harmoniously intertwining with Mago techniques. Despite the significant differences, the martial arts of the Hua and Mago mountains were weaved into one in his skillful possession. His passion for the development of forgotten techniques gradually gave him unprecedented power. The techniques they, together with Khan Co, once studied, have undergone such changes that maybe even Han himself would not recognize them now. Darkness and loneliness turned the lads of Hoch into an even more gloomy and closed one, immersing it in a maelstrom of deep reflections. He did not even know how much effort I had to make to achieve a dreamy goal. In this cave, he only had time, and it was a miracle. A spontaneous desire to destroy everything in its path has increasingly mastered it, and the only goal, to break through, gave him the inspiration to move forward. He always felt the debt to the Hua Mountain, but his combat methods did not see a trace of kindness or justice. Mago combined his techniques with the skills of the ladies of Ho, creating a new, gloomy power. Again and again he struck, the only thing that kept his consciousness from the pernicious land of madness. And one day it finally happened. Outing his blows, he suddenly froze, because his ears came a mysterious sound. He listened hard, trying to determine where this strange noise came from. It seemed as if it were insect. And he did not lose. Dozens of wasps that flew from all sides were stuck around him. As he noticed them, he immediately felt a threat, prepared for a probable attack. The axes were constantly fluttering with wings, climbing it in a tireless rhythm. It was from his punched potholes in the boulder that erupted forces, filling the cave with anger and danger. The situation reached a critical mark. It was necessary to take action immediately. At this time, he applied his skills to cope with the wasps that were hidden. The blow, which could be broken, boss, was ready to spread them to pieces. However, this technique did not produce any result. They only climbed up, captured by strong wind streams. However, every time they worn out, the wasps were relentlessly returning and attacked with double fierce. They attacked with unspeakable cruelty, and there were so much that it seemed that there would be no end. I will give a tight teeth firmly, suffering from this burning pain that affected every part of his body. The wasps attacked it with frantic rage, leaving many bites on the body, from which there were no shreds of skin without wounds. It was at this moment that he realized that these wasps were not as ordinary as they seemed at first glance. They were special. Are they really poisonous? How is it possible? Or are it really poisonous wasps? Was in his mind. He tried to shake them out of his skin, but these creatures were so much that it was impossible to count. I finally made a choice. It's time to run, and he flew the head in the direction opposite to danger. In the place where the water was worried, he realized that the only way was to dive down. A well-known immersion in the water returned to him a feeling of relief, albeit for a short time. The poison had such a powerful impact that it exceeded any idea of the boundaries of his mind and endurance. His body twisted in torment, and his eyes were burning with red flames, as if pierced with blood. The veins were swollen and sprouting all over the body, clearly pointing to its torment. The Hoi painted pain because of an unbreakable spirit and extraordinary willpower. However, there was one important aspect. Itching was brought to rabies, exceeding even pain in intensity. He was engulfed by unbearable itching and flour, and he began to measure minutes to the alleged end of his life. Bite his teeth with all his strength, he barely kept his desire to break the skin. I will seek hard to overcome the poison that penetrated into his body. He baptized these creatures with hellish axes, convinced that their swarm escaped from the abyss of hell itself. The difficulty was that he did not imagine how to resist them. Despite the exceptional martial arts skills, it was almost incredibly difficult to get to them. He was lucky to have fish in the stocks, but sooner or later and these stocks are exhausted. The only solution is to find a shield that will allow you to break through these fatal swings of insects. A shield that will be extremely useful in these circumstances. A shield capable of stopping enemies is his most reliable defense in this terrible world. I will give you a hastily with this thick swarm of insects, trying to break through it. They swarmed in incredible quantities, their terrible buzzing echoed with a terrible response. He waved his hands vigorously, trying to repel enemies with his blows. At first glance, it seemed that things were successful, but later, these efforts were defeated. The water was his only shelter, and every time he turned to her, he was persecuted again and bites. I will give Ho with despair of his forehead against a cold stone, hoping to find at least a crumb of consolation. His head was torn spikes of pain, penetrating it ruthlessly. His body again and again appeared wounds from which endless blood flowed. Time has passed incredibly rapidly, as if the cave had absorbed his existence. The Ho once again took advantage of the technique of the piercing fist, putting all his strength in the blow. Several insects did not survive the blow and fell on the ground. However, most swarms were able to survive and rushed to him like a destructive tsunami. He took a fighting position, intensely preparing for a decisive duel. And so he changed his pose, and his hand, heavy, like an anvil, mildly swept through the air. His movements were full of grace and sophistication, like a dance that harmoniously combined energy and tenderness. The Hod has realized that the achievement of victory does not depend on the large amount of energy, but lies in the skillful use of the technique of Qinggun, inherent in the Mudan sect. After numerous attempts to give a huge swarm of insects, he finally understood it. Under the influence of the technique, Zingan beetles began to disappear suddenly. He skillfully concentrated the flow of air between his fingers. Having formed a vacuum, the air began to thicken around his hands, becoming a kind of trap. So insects were trapped from the air that directed their path to the direction of the current. Hundreds of beetles flew up, rotating in the whirlwind, where their wings almost touched each other, and the powerful air currents attached their dance to this chaotic swindle. He baptized this himself, invented the motion of the devastating hand. The device formed a vacuum, which later, under pressure, exploded and destroyed everything around. However, not all insects survived under pressure. Most of the swarm still remained alive. The body of Ho-Hos began to move with an incredible speed for the average person. This step was necessary to give all the power of Zingon. It is like to get into hell. He flashed in his thoughts when he met all his power. Meanwhile, the mountains created a fascinating landscape on the horizon, which took a breath. There, among the majestic mountain ranges, the chariot, decorated with the flag with the inscription, "Silver Stream," slowly. They hurried to every day, trying to have time to the devil, which had already drew up on the horizon. Each of the attendees did their own business, carefully preparing for rest. At the very top of the cart, a young man who was called John Bo was settled. An elderly man is located next to him. The old man wondered if he was cheerful now, and the interlocutor gladly replied that the landscape was striking in his incredibility. Everything is buried in bright greens. With a smile on his face, his grandfather nodded in agreement. However, at heart he thought, well, a fool. If his mother were alive, he would not wander behind his father where he would not go. Suddenly, the older pointed to the place, stating that it was here that they would stay on vacation. The team was instructed to equip the camp at this point. They completely surrounded this territory with their carts loaded. At this time, Gin was communicating with his father, who was busy with the preparation of barbecue. The father asked his son to bring the necessary utensils and products. Gin was approached and grabbed the huge frying pan needed to cook. He considered cooking the greatest occupation that could only be imagined on this planet. Soon everything was prepared. The table was already expected on the table. "And what will we please ourselves today?" Gin asked his father. According to the plan, they had to prepare sweet meat from chili and fried beef, but the father decided to retreat from the plan and add pork to the soup. It sounded surprisingly delicious. For 8 years, since Gene was traveling with his dad, he could proudly claim that he possesses all the qualities of a real cook. The father remembered during the conversation that all the routes should be postponed before their return. After all, they will reach the wine shop. It is impossible to wander forever without the goal. They were already waiting for them, so the father gave Gina to start the preparation. He thoroughly stirred the dish that boiled in Kazan, adding the last perfect strokes. Taking an axe in his hands, Gin was because it was determined to demonstrate his culinary abilities. And immediately, with the sophistication of a true artist, began to skillfully cut the ingredients. He did it so skillfully and clearly that all around were fascinated by this sight. Each vegetable that touched his hands looked flawlessly sliced. Jean was fervently sought to demonstrate his talent in the world, but his dream could only come true when he and his father will finally be able to open his own wine shop. Noticing how joyful his son, his father asked if he really was feeling happiness. On this, Jean, because with a smile on his face, replied that the opening of the wine shop was always his cherished dream. "So, if we stopped here for a break, it's time to teach you the art of cooking," his father said, smiling. "So I can become a wonderful chef?" Jinbo asked enthusiastically. The father replied to this, "Certainly." Initially, his father explained, he should meet an international chef. It was from this master that the father took over the culinary skills that he still appreciates. Gin was overwhelmed by expectations, dreaming of mastering culinary arts like his talented father. He decided to ask whether his father made a promise, and he assured with a smile, "Certainly." Meanwhile, the rest has already caught the seductive aroma that spilled around. The aroma was impressive, and no shadow of doubt was left. The boss was again surprised by the work of culinary arts. A man with a mustache wondered what treats would be served today. The boss explained that he intends to prepare a dish of pork and beef, which he collected during one of the recent trips. In addition, he took care of carefully fried pork, which will taste real gourmets. Beef was carried out in a sweet and sour sauce from Chile, and the mustache was no longer to try this original dish. Enchanted by the aroma, Mustan turned to Ginbo, noting that it was time for him to go the path that his father had laid. My father approached Gin, put his hand on his shoulder, and said that Gin's intuition even surpassed his own. Everyone is comfortable at the table, silently indulging in the unsurpassed tastes of the dishes that they enjoyed. They discussed solely how the meat seems to dissolve in their tongue. The team called Streaming Silver was actively preparing for the way to go to the road the next day. There were many ways to Chongvon, but their determination did not know the limits. After traveling, they were alert, ready to meet any surprises. Everyone took his place. Gina's father rested next to the riders, looking carefully at the road. Jean has spread in the chariot, thinking about how relentlessly coincided the last year. He barely restrained the excitement in anticipation tomorrow when they finally arrive in Chonvon. Before him, a book with recipes stood, because he was convinced that it was necessary to master all the culinary secrets that his father had long passed to him. Suddenly, another grimace appeared on his face, as if something unexpected attracted his attention. Surprised and then not fully understood this strangeness, he got up from the place where he had just sat. At this point, the riders stopped, fascinated by staring at the distance. They opened a majestic picture, the hell of the valley. A powerful explosion was suddenly heard, and the djinn scumped away. He addressed his father to the question of what happened, but he was just embarrassed and could not find words for the answer. "What kind of uncle is going on?" said Mustan anxiously, not taking his look away from the place where the explosion just sounded. Another warrior said that it seems that real problems were approaching in the valley. He ordered everyone to stay still, and he went to know the circumstances. He took with him Yupo and Chunho and ordered others to remain a routine. Once upon a time, a majestic canyon was scattered here, which subsequently suffered a collapse, turning the landscape into a plain locality, now known as the Hell of the Valley. The military units and entire armies wanted to bypass this dangerous valley every time while keeping away. They arrived at her, having saddled the horses, and were immediately captured by opening their eyes. The whole valley was transformed into a wasteland, like a field that passed through the battle. Lonely rocks stood in front of them, silently extending to heaven. Suddenly, their attention was captured by something absolutely amazing. Among the rebellious rocks, a single man was visible. His muscular back remained not covered, and long black hair cascade fell on his shoulders. He was breathing evenly and calmly, standing his back, as if he was not aware of their presence. He only barely turned his head in their direction and looked back on them, keeping a cold facial expression. In his gaze, a sudden passion for murder suddenly broke out. It was only necessary to look at him once, and the warrior felt a wave of trembling on the body. In his gaze it was clearly read, "Just look at me, and you will not become." "Who are you like that?" asked Ho-Ho when they came closer. He, afraid to meet the sight of the lads, barely said that he belonged to the commander-in-chief of the House of Streaming Silver. "I will never even heard about this place before." He succinctly told about their origin and the end purpose of the journey. During the conversation, they confessed that their journey was heading to the west. This instantly attracted the attention of the ladies. As he approached them, he asked for forgiveness for his unusual behavior. Soon he was near them in the chariot, becoming part of their journey. A man with his mustache staring at him, asking others the question of his personality. He was informed that the details would be discussed later, and now only one thing is important. They decided to take it with them. The mustachioed never met anyone similar, and from this man punched him on ants. "Together with Ginbo, I will give Ho in the chariot." With a smile on his face, Jean tried to wake him up, making fun of his name. "I will sleep carelessly without responding to his calls." When Jean persistently repeated his question, I will barely mutately muttered, complaining about his perseverance.